Hey, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Super blessed and super appreciative that we have Baljeet here in person in San Diego. So we've got the folks here and everybody joining online. Tim and I are going to be monitoring the chat. So if you do have any questions or anything, please let us know and we'll relay them to Baljeet and let him kind of do his magic on everything. We do want to make it as interactive as possible. So please don't be shy and do feel free to ask any questions or let us know. But I think we finally got the audio worked out. My laptop is now muted, which should serve everybody better. And other than that, if you like, I'll go ahead and hand the microphone over to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right on.
It's an honor. All right, so good morning, good afternoon, everyone, online and in person. Thanks for being here. It's a beautiful day. I'm from Canada, so you can see I'm wearing a sweater. It was a little bit chilly when I left last night, but it's a beautiful sunny day. How many of you actually attended my first two workshops? Okay. So, okay. Okay, so how many online? Anybody who attended my workshop? Available online? Okay, so some are there. Okay. To the benefit of people who did not attend my previous sessions, so let me just formally share my background. I'm Baljeet. I am based in Vancouver in Canada, in BC. I'm the founder and CEO of TeejLab. Before starting TeejLab, I was the VP of Research at Black Duck Software that got acquired by Synopsys, a cybersecurity company. Before that, I was with SAP. Before that, I was a research scientist in various academic positions. I continued to work very closely with various academic institutes. And throughout these associations with enterprise world and academic experiences, I'm very blessed to apply my training in data management, data science for cybersecurity problems. And in full disclosure, I am not a typical compliance or security or even somebody who has audit background. But throughout these experiences, I've learned many aspects of security, compliance, auditing, and risk management through many wise and talented individuals like you. In this particular workshop, just to refresh your thoughts, I'm going to talk about API risk management from a licensing point of view. Just to share with you the description of this 4-series workshop. We started with API ecosystem, how they're evolving globally, and what risks and what opportunities they bring to us, to enterprise world, as well as individuals contributing to those ecosystems. In the second workshop, my focus was on security, how APIs can be compromised, and so on and so forth. This workshop is in particular focused on licensing issues, various licensing models, and as a consumer or producer of those APIs, what you should keep in mind. So I know you're wondering, it's not mentioned, it's not on my agenda here, but the reason why I kept this slide was all my experience in the last 10 years or so has been on API ecosystems. I started my journey with applying data science, data management for large-scale data problems. But as I mentioned in the beginning, I was very blessed. I got introduced to cybersecurity issues, in particular open source risk management. How open source has changed and transformed the industry, and has become a de facto industry standard when it comes to application development. So throughout those experiences, we have started to apply these principles that we have learned for open source management to APIs as well. And that is essentially what gave birth to some of these ideas that I'm going to share with you starting today in this particular workshop on API licensing management. As you can see on my agenda here, do we have a laser?
I don't think we are that fancy, or do we?
Okay, sometimes they have it. Okay.
Maybe if you did, they wouldn't see it online, so.
Okay, never mind. So I can just use this laser here. Yes. So in my first part, of this workshop, I'm going to talk about, in general, what are the legal frameworks around API usage, how you are producing APIs, how you are consuming APIs, and what is the legal framework around it, from a user point of view, as well as from a producer point of view. In order to help you better understand this, I'm not going to straight away jump to business models and here are the different licensing models and whatnot. Perhaps I will share some stories that might inspire you. Why do I care about this problem so much? And why you should care about this problem so much. In particular, I will talk about how historically APIs have evolved to become such an important digital asset for any enterprise. I'm sure you all come from different backgrounds. I know Tim comes from an audit background. Dave wears different hats at different times, but primarily cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Focused on various aspects of risk management. Anybody lawyer in the room? Oh, you are, great. Thank you for being with us. Yeah. Anybody lawyer online?
And that's okay. We're not judging. Yeah.
And then we will look into various frameworks that are already available that can help us manage these ecosystems in a better way. In particular, looking at different laws and regulations that are already in place, either as law of the lands or certain enterprise policies. Then I will look into what kind of APIs you are dealing with. Like any other product in the world, APIs are products. In the last 10 years or so, the mind has shifted in many organizations where APIs are now being treated as products, and they should be. So I'm going to talk about what are the different licensing models. For example, if you have internal APIs, external APIs, you have freely available APIs, or you have commercial APIs. So what are the different aspects of those licensing, and how do you manage intellectual property based on that? Then my focus will shift on, in the first two parts, I'm not talking about either you're a producer or you're a consumer. I'm taking a holistic view, because many organizations are like that. They don't only produce APIs, but they're also consuming those APIs to bring digitization in their organization, or to bring partner products and services into their ecosystem. So we are going to, regardless of whether you're a producer or consumer, we will, in the first two parts, we'll focus there. But then, after we take a break, one section will be completely focused on API producer. Okay?
You as an organization,
as
a startup or a law enterprise,
when you are connecting your systems with other systems, what are some of the considerations in your mind that you should keep? And then in the third phase, we'll take a break. Before that, I'll shift my focus to API consumers. And in biased in some ways, that is the part which I actually enjoy the most. Believe it or not, I've seen cases where the consumption of APIs have gone into hundreds and thousands. Easily thousands of APIs in one single product. I've seen cases like that. Forget about the entire enterprise. And that actually creates a lot of problems, not only from a licensing point of view, but just in general from a business risk management point of view. So I'll talk about what are some of the hidden risks coming from third-party APIs. And I'll show you some practical examples. Towards the end, with the support from everybody else, I hope you have brought your laptop. We will go into some practical examples. We'll analyze some of the licenses, and you will do it. And you don't have to worry about it. It's not very technical. You can simply log in, and I'll show you step by step how you can do some of those due diligence by yourself. Before you onboard an API, what are some of the basic stuff you can look from a licensing point of view about these third-party APIs so that you know what you're getting into. Awesome. It may sound very easy, it may sound very simple, but things are a bit more complex than what we can imagine. As usual, we'll keep some time towards the end for some Q&A, and then I will wrap this up with some takeaways and then also some home exercises that you can follow up to our fourth and final workshop, which will be, I can just share some thoughts on that, which will be more focused on governance. So again, putting all the pieces together, APIs, ecosystem globally and enterprise, security, licensing, then governance, putting everything together. So that is what the agenda is for today's workshop, as well as looking ahead to the next workshop. All right, so let's get started with the very first item. Which is trying to understand the basics behind what forms these legal frameworks around API usage. So let me start with some numbers. As a data scientist, as a computer scientist, I like to give analogies that are backed by data. You know, that there is some science behind it, why industry is evolving, the way it is evolving, and we can track, we can see the consumptions, we can see some of those trends through the data analysis. So one of the trends I want to share with you is this number. This is by IDC, International Data Corporation. And they estimate that in 2025 or so, we will be consuming globally on the internet 120 zettabytes of data. Okay, so just to let you know, 1 zettabyte is 1 trillion terabytes.
That sounds like a lot.
Yes,
I'm not a math guy, but that's a lot of zeros.
Yeah. 9 zeros, 10 with 9 zeros, yes. So indeed it is, and as you can see that this is growing. And you can see that why this is growing: IoT, AI, smart homes, smart vehicles, smart devices, smart everything, right? So wherever there is a data, there is an opportunity for us to create value, not just for you, but also to the entire ecosystem. For example, cameras. It's your personal property, but can you monetize it for evidence to law enforcement? Okay. So there are many opportunities we see all around us in which we are seeing this growth of data that becomes available in many cases publicly over the internet, but also a lot of this data is private and to some extent in dark web as well, which is not necessarily a topic that we will touch. You must be wondering why I'm talking about this. That relates to this particular slide. So what is this slide telling you? This shares how much investment has gone and continue to goes into cloud. Because as we imagine, a lot of the data and the software, when we're talking about over the internet, much of this is also publicly available, right? So companies like Google, Amazon, are pumping in multi-billion dollars to create the infrastructure so that enterprises can live in these clouds. either private, public, or hybrid, doesn't really matter. But that's what you are seeing on your screen. And every aspect of cloud, either it is infrastructure, or either it is streamlining your business process, or it is about creating SaaS, software as services applications, or even supporting your other activities like security. You
You can see that
throughout from 2021 all the way to 2025, these numbers are constantly increasing because the data is increasing.
Yeah.
Enterprises are moving into the cloud. The services that are being offered are also, in many cases, SaaS rather than traditional monolithic applications that are delivered on-prem. So that has expanded this ecosystem greatly.
I got a question for you. So obviously the highest number is 2025, but we're only in May.
That is true. So these are some projections.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
These are some projections. So if you look at the trend, it is expected that the most money is being spent on cloud applications, building
Gotcha.
applications that are native to cloud. And that's what you see, that this increase is consistent either from a business process point of view or infrastructure or cloud systems. But yes, the 2025 is a projection.
Got it. Cool.
Now, any idea, we all know, who the cloud services providers are, but any idea what's the market share of these companies?
It's all over the place. I study this figure all the time.
You do?
Because the way Microsoft calculates the revenue is different than the way AWS does. And AWS, a lot of AWS revenue is built Amazon, which is a little bit different. Microsoft doesn't count that revenue the same way. And then Microsoft does not count M365 as its cloud platform, but other vendors do. So if you put M365 in Azure, it would be way bigger.
I see.
If you started counting how Microsoft hosts on Azure, it also inflate the price. GCP is overinflated because, once again, you should probably only telling the revenue based on the external client GCP hosts Google, and that's 70% of its revenue comes from itself, and AWS hosts hosts Amazon on that, so it's like a weird math between the whole thing. So,
True.
So I'm interested to see, because I see it all over the place. Like obviously AWS way ahead and Microsoft slightly behind. You do like another calculation another way, Microsoft the other ahead. It fluctuates.
Yeah, it depends on your methodology. How do you rank them? There is no right and wrong answer here. But again, depending on the scale you take, yes.
That's the market share for customers, but maybe not the biggest revenue.
You could be right. So this is based on the numbers I got by ChatGPT, or I asked a bunch of systems, what do you think? What are some of the biggest cloud companies? And this is the answer given by Perplexity. Now, they had their references, which I did not quote, but what I said is Perplexity. But Perplexity thinks 30% of the market share, it's a market share. I do not know what's the definition of market. Is it revenue? Is it the customer? Is it combination of both? I don't know. But good observations, Matt.
This is not revenue. This is based on market share.
Market share.
Customers.
Good.
And also another observation that Alibaba and Tencent, because this chart here is going to use them in Chinese currency. If you did a PPP analysis, Alibaba would be way bigger.
Right.
Same way that everybody says the American economy is bigger than Chinese, but in reality, the Chinese economy is probably 50 to 60% bigger than the American economy.
Right. So these are very good comments. But nonetheless, we can all agree, as Matthew mentioned, AWS, perhaps between AWS and Azure, they are the largest cloud services providers in many dimensions, either customers, revenue. But regardless of that, this is the distribution of some of the cloud services provider. But that's not the real story I'm trying to tell you. The real story is this guy. the data and the software from my previous slides, they're all moving into the cloud. So if you look at the right-hand side of the picture, then that's your cloud. Left-hand side, you see data from all aspects of your life, location data, your geographical data, your enterprise data, your personal social media data. A lot of this data is in the cloud. So the software and the data are coming closer. So we remember the days 20, 25 years ago when we would run data warehouses. When you had to produce a report, you had to wait for perhaps weeks and months to generate those reports over a period of time. But now, enterprises and business leaders want those insights right away, perhaps many cases real time. Okay, and that has become possible because data and the software that crunches that data are living together closer in the cloud. So what impact it has on the topic that we are talking about today? That is the story I'm here to share.
Gotcha.
So this combination of data and cloud and the ability for enterprises to live in the cloud has created tremendous opportunities. And that's where APIs are playing a pivot role in this ecosystem. Because your ability to expose this data to your stakeholders has increased by many, many fold. On the past, when it is difficult for you to amalgamate all your data, expose it, even internally was difficult. One department would not talk to another department. And it would take months and months, or send data from Dropboxes or emails or Excel sheets, and it would take hours and hours of work to create a simple report. But that's not the case. And this is true because APIs empower you to expose those capabilities almost in real time. In many cases, APIs are nothing but transacting data for you. So this has created new business models, new revenue opportunities. At the same time, new types of businesses, because each API that you build in your ecosystem is like a window or a door, right? Just like in a house, you have a mansion, you have a much larger risk of those windows or doors or windows being broken to cause any harm. Similarly, this ecosystem has created tremendous opportunity, but allowed us to look into this ecosystem from licensing, security, and other perspectives. So what is it? Before I go into the detail, imagine this situation. You have an app or you have an API, and your API talks to other applications or vice versa. Okay, either you're consuming, you're producing, but at the end of the day, they're nothing but transacting data. Okay, the simplest example I can give you is weather data. So you are that's your logistic company. You need real-time weather information for your fleet that are going in different parts of the world. But at the same time, ChatGPT is also data. In many cases, it's more intelligent piece of information. But at the end of the day, you ask ChatGPT with a prompt or a question, ChatGPT gives you an answer back with a summary or whatever you're trying to achieve. And that's essentially what my focus is. It's all around data, either a raw piece of information or a processed piece of information. And you might recall this slide from my very first part of the workshop, where I shared this history, how APIs have evolved. APIs are not new. They have been existing as a concept early 60s or 70s with companies like IBM, Microsoft. They basically leveraged upon this ecosystem to create a large development ecosystem of applications around them. But what changed in 2000s or so, as cloud took off in a big way and the software and the data started to live in the cloud, your ability to expose this data through an API was transformational change. That not only created opportunities for the companies to monetize their data, because how much you can do internally within your data. So how about you expose this data to a developer community. Let's see what they come up with. Okay, so that's where it has created a completely a new way to look at how we can look at our digital economy. So let me give you how the front end and back end in a typical API system looks like. So on the very left-hand side, you have applications that are calling those APIs. Okay. In the middle, you have something called access control or gateways that actually are servicing those requests. API at the end of the day is nothing but a request to fetch some piece of information from somewhere. Okay, depending on if you are a host who has provided those APIs, then this API fetches those resources either from your enterprise systems, your networks, your customer records, your student records, or your employee records, and gives that result back to the application. That's the basic mechanism of all the APIs you can imagine. Okay, is it SOAP? Is it REST? Is it responding in JSON? Is it responding in XML? That's irrelevant to us here. As long as you have a mechanism to connect to a system which is facilitated. Now, companies needed to build this infrastructure because API usage was growing. Imagine eBay, imagine Facebook. These are very large platforms in which API rate limits can go across hundreds and thousands or perhaps millions of calls in a day, depending on the ecosystem that you are interacting with. But nonetheless, the middle layer is what it supports: the scalability, ensuring the security, maintaining the scalability, rate limits, all kind of stuff that is needed for you to support your API ecosystem. To give even further, this is a small piece of code that is making call to Google APIs. This is what is important part. So Google is hosting a service with this address. And all this program, what it's trying to do is passing some parameters to access that service. Okay, I'm not going into the technical details, but I wanted to give you the minuscule aspect of APIs, small piece of code. When you are consuming an API, that's what it takes to call a service from any third-party vendor. Compared to some of the applications where we are writing our own code, could be hundreds and millions of lines of code. That is what makes APIs very minuscule micro assets within our ecosystem from a consumer point of view. But what is an API? Is API this? Is API this? Or is it this? Or is it this? Or API is beyond this? Because the mechanisms that are built to fetch that piece of information from your information system, developers have coded something. So what is it? Is it an API, the entire plumbing thing, or it is just the tap? What is it, in your opinion?
I think it could be anywhere in that spectrum, depending on what you're trying to accomplish or ask for and receive back.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Matt?
So the question was, can you rephrase the question?
Just and use an outdoor voice.
Oh, yeah, can you, it was just the second you said the
What
question.
is
I
an
like
API?
it. So what is it?
Yeah, what do you consider an API?
Well, you can have an API management system, something that sits in between the API and the client of the API. But an API can be derived off many other APIs. So it could be this giant ecosystem that extends way back beyond the scenes of what just the client sees. So the client might just see one API, one IP, but that API is connected to 50 other APIs.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So you have actually complicated the example even further. I'm glad you did it. My question was even simpler. In this particular case, what do you consider an API?
Yeah.
Let's say you are in your program, this is your program.
Uh-huh.
You are making call to Google APIs.
Yes.
What do you consider API at your end? Just this part? You consider this part, the rest as well.
I'm a security person, so I consider it all. So I mean, because for me, it's not a complete product unless it has security monitoring around it and built into the product or whatever. Otherwise, it's just in my conceptual mind, it's just an endpoint that returns a piece of data.
Yeah.
But I look at it in terms of like, you know,
The whole
in
ecosystem.
Yeah,
production.
but any of those points could be a point of, I don't say attack or vulnerability, you know.
Yes.
Attack services.
Good point. The unfortunate part is you don't control this one. You don't own this, you don't control it. The only part you control is this guy. That makes things more interesting. Remember, this is the part upon which you depend. Your business depends. And if this API is a Joe developer API, cannot support your ecosystem, then what's the business value of this API? And that changes how we look at APIs differently. So, and this is just the tip of the iceberg in which you have issues here, you have issues here, and also, more importantly, in many of your applications, this part is so widely spread. From a large point of view, that is one of the risks that organizations are facing today. Why? Because it is much easier for an adventurous developer to write this piece of code, accelerate the product development, because it could be ChatGPT. Instead of figuring out some of the data that they need to create or integrate with different things, they can simply call an API, which is available as an off-the-shelf solution that they can integrate so easily. They can simply create an account with their own IDs, with a personal account, but then create risk for their organization. How do you detect this? How do you manage this? How do you account for those? How many vendors are like that? Believe it or not, thousands of them. And unfortunately, if you ask a CTO or CIO, do you know all your APIs across your ecosystem? The answer is no. An honest answer is no.
Yeah, or God, no.
Yeah, and you know the reasons behind this? There are several reasons, but there are two prime reasons. What do you think?
What do you think, Tim? You've been quiet.
Yeah, I've been quiet for a reason.
I don't think there's discipline in most organizations having inventories and not having a good API inventory to comment even for forward. So I'm really interested in just kind of like learning, I don't know if you're going to touch on this, but more about detection tools and things like that, where we can discover our APIs that we have, because we have so much legacy and things like that, every API endpoint has a risk. And unless we have a good understanding of our inventory to be able to monitor those things, really make sure that, APIs go through the proper security reviews, et cetera, like, it's just having a handle on inventory is our hardest thing, and having that discipline, right now, a little manual to get that inventory together, because I don't know if the tools are quite where we need to be. So I don't know if you've got some recommendations there, but maybe you'll get to that.
I do, and that's what we do as a living.
Okay.
So discovery is the but this is not sales pitch, so but we can talk about
Are you doing the sales? This is part of the sales pitch, kind of.
not necessarily.
Not
No.
really, okay.
And Baljeet, if you can stay closer to the mic for people.
Yeah, and I want to be respectful of the mandate with ISACA we have. This is purely educational.
Right.
But of course, if you learn something here and you want to ask more questions, we are more than happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to do those transactions, to help us sustain what we do. Yes, Matt.
I was gonna say, any time you get a penetration
It's done to work with a third party.
should happen in turn up for two, you're gonna hand over all your public IPs. And the tools out there to go discover all this, but where you get in trouble is this. I've personally gotten in trouble and burned on this. Is everybody builds your platform on microservices. So you're building APIs all over the place. Most of them aren't public IPs. But then you got one developer that convinces one person to take one of those private APIs, it's part of a microservices ecosystem, and make it public.
Yeah.
Without anybody else's knowledge, it's just as simple as a configuration setting, and all of a sudden you've got vulnerability that you're not aware of all of a sudden, and was not caught in a traditional pen test, because a traditional pen test is good. Once a year, come in and put your public IPs, and say 2 weeks later,
Opens one of those up.
it's not gonna be caught for next year unless you're using like a cloud security posture management or an internal attack surface monitor or whatever built into a cloud product. But I think that's how it happens a lot of the time. It just inadvertently gets opened up for a developer not thinking about security, and then you've got this hole.
Yeah, and not only that, but these are really good points. And discovery is a very important part of the problem now. As a matter of fact, OWASP has included discovery as one of the top 10 problems in their 2023 version. I've been preaching about the discovery problem since 2019. I was glad to see 2023 they included. They don't call it discovery, they call it inventory management. So this is what exactly you are mentioning, inventory. We don't know. And Matt, the problem you talked about is also very, very much important, because you're talking about an internal API accidentally being exposed outside. But I'm also talking about the ones that you are starting to consume without actually knowing who are the vendors, right? And another important point.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Another important point. Our applications are massive, millions of lines of code. And half of it, or in many cases even more, is open source. Remember, I talked about in one of my first workshops, open source is actually 80 to 90, depending on which industry, what type of application. If you are a car manufacturer, then the components are very limited. But if you are a social media, then your entire stack is in many cases open source. So many of these snippets come through the open source usage without even realizing that. You downloaded it in a GitHub library, added into your application stack, and suddenly realize that you have. Now they are sleeping. They are not necessarily exposed, but they're sitting there to be exploited. In some cases, we have seen, especially with AI-specific APIs, there is a possibility that this can be used to maliciously include in the ecosystem so that this can create a backdoor. So various issues. Once again, my focus today is not on security. My focus today is on the licensing, on the business model parts. How do we manage it, either as a producer or consumer? So in summary, that's what we have today in our today's digital economy. You are an enterprise. You are connected to many, many, many systems through those APIs, some through gateway, some point-to-point connections. Because she mentioned a very important point, legacy systems. Now, legacy systems, for example, banks. Now, banks still run on mainframe in many cases, right? They have to support more modern applications, mobile apps, image scanning applications to deposit your checks and do many, many things. So they build different layers on top of those legacy systems, expose these modern technologies. For example, REST API running somehow on a legacy system through some connections. And there is always a chance of those things falling apart, or not looking into, from a compliance point, how it is exposing PII, FII, and creating problems for your organization. So that is the global view and the trends that I shared with you that is shaping up today's industry. APIs are indispensable to organization. They are very minuscule. That is the thing. That is the problem in many ways. They are overlooked. People have a very good open source security program. People have governance teams. People have, in many cases, application security program. They have pen testing, and all that stuff is there. But focus is not on APIs. Okay, now through these workshops, we are creating this awareness, and many people like us, they are doing the same thing. But that is what the true representation of today's digital economy is. You are there. You are more smart, AI. You are more connected through APIs, and this connection and this density is further enhancing.
Yeah.
And this will continue to grow because remember, data is increasing.
Yeah,
And
so I was just gonna say, and even like when we were
you were
showing
showing the
historical data, if we think about the proliferation of mobile devices and things like that, where so much of the social media or even the weather app, like you described, are a traffic, you know.
absolutely. Not only that, but think about new type of opportunities that are coming up with the data that we may own as citizens. A lot of the data, unfortunately, are owned in many ways by these big companies. But also think about data coming
Data
from
coming
the
from the
shoes,
shoe,
data
data
coming
coming
from
from the
glasses.
glasses.
Wherever there is a data, there is an opportunity for monetization because that data has value for somebody,
Right.
right? So could you be a participant in that monetary ecosystem? You allow your data to be exchanged. And wherever there is a data, there is an opportunity for a connector. And that connector can be used. That's the beauty about APIs. It's available over the internet, like a bulb. Anybody can access and get it. So that's the global view. Now let me take you inside a typical enterprise API ecosystem. How many of you actually are actively playing a role in this API ecosystem? I know some of you not necessarily focused on APIs, but you're doing application, you're doing auditing, you have other responsibility, data governance. So would you like to share some thoughts? Have you looked into APIs and what kind of challenges you are trying to address?
Oh, and just make sure, if you speak loud enough.
I'm also in security, cybersecurity, focused on cloud. And a lot of the work that we do is in architecture reviews with our engineering teams as they're thinking about creating complementary APIs, internal or external. What are the security best practices around those, making sure they're not exposed to anything that they shouldn't be, and then validating those post API launch.
Okay, great. So who are your stakeholders? Developers?
Many people, so compliance, developers, customers, internal teams that actually have product feature that they're trying to build an API either around or to support.
Yeah, great. Top. So did I capture your thought correctly? Any thoughts from you? Are you looking at licensing issues around API usages or the APIs you guys are building, how they should be exposed to the outside world under what conditions?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can you share some thoughts?
Well, so for us, our main product is not exposed publicly.
Hey, Marty, just if you can speak real loud, because we're using the mic on the laptop up here,
Ah, gotcha.
is the reason why.
So for us, this matters more. We have two portals. We have a patient portal and client portal that are exposed publicly. And so all of this is something that we focus on for those.
Okay. Great. Any thoughts?
You're asking how I interact with
Yeah,
APIs
yeah.
and other.
The entire ecosystem.
Part of my career is compliance. Part of my career is AI development. Part of my career is cloud platform architecture and security architecture. So it's just so pervasive in my life. I mean, everything is built around APIs. I mean, I started out 20 years ago when API was not even a concept. It was a so-called, remote call or whatever, which came out of like calls to like COM objects, like DCOM objects, which now it evolved into the formal API that is today. And I mean, it's almost like saying, if you're in technology, you're involved in one way, even if you don't know it, you're involved one way or the other in this ecosystem up here. Especially with AI, it's very interesting because AI is built on millions of APIs. So you're calling into ChatGPT, that's one API endpoint. But ChatGPT is just connected to all these different other APIs out there, different vendors. And then the second phase of AI companies that are starting to come out right now, they're building their product on 3 different LLMs, which are connected back to 10,000 other APIs. So it just makes it even more complicated. So, so it's like, it's everything. It's everywhere. It's pervasive.
Okay.
Great. So that's, many of these thoughts are captured on this slide. I just wanted to understand, are we off? It looks like we are right on track. If you look at the bottom, you have different applications in your system. You have analysis tools, security workbench, analytical reporting tools. They're all running on APIs, connecting, fetching information. Some of them public, some of them private. If you go towards the right, you have gateways in your ecosystem to access control those APIs, to control who's accessing your APIs, who's fetching your data, but also you are consuming others' APIs as well. So that's where you are having meshes, service meshes that are managing that. You are connected to different marketplaces, either as a producer or a consumer. You have your own API marketplace, or you are building a partner ecosystem in which your APIs are available as a pay-as-you-go service. Okay, for example, I forgot this company's name, but there are several API marketplaces in which companies are putting out their products and services exposed through APIs for people and workers to consume those services. So there are marketplaces. On top of that, you have your public and open stakeholders, people who are consuming your APIs, or depending on your APIs for their own ecosystem. Or internally, you have compliance teams, you have lawyers looking at the various policies that you need to enforce, but also looking at merger and acquisition policies. For example, when you're buying companies, these APIs are coming into bulk in your ecosystem. Suddenly, you have one product that needs to be integrated in an ecosystem, and you have perhaps hundreds and thousands of new inventories that you have to manage. Okay, and depending on the scale of the company, maybe you're buying a startup that is serving a small ecosystem, but now suddenly this has become part of a very large ecosystem. Do they have infrastructure to support that, or they are becoming bottleneck in your ecosystem? So this may not necessarily be true for all the organization, but part of this is for pretty much every organization.
Right.
Either you are a startup or you are a very large enterprise, but this essentially captures the heart of what an API ecosystem is. Why I'm sharing this with you, slowly taking you to the licensing issues, slowly taking you to the picture I showed you. What is an API? Is it the front end? Is it the back end? Is it the middle? Or is it all of it? So those are some of the questions we'll address in this next session. Okay, so the reason I asked who are your stakeholders was to better understand where we are as industry. So we haven't figured out many things still in this ecosystem, but more or less we understand it's not the engineers who are building APIs that are important, but also product owners. You may have a product that you're shipping or you're hosting, but that product also is exposing certain APIs. Maybe you're not charging for those API usages right now, but in the future you might. So you have business people involved. In many cases, your customers are asking you, you know what, your product is beautiful, but we don't like your GUI. Just get rid of it. Give us your APIs. We will integrate your APIs into our workflow, and we don't have to look at your UI. And that is what people are demanding, because many times they have their own workflows. They have their own dashboards. All they care is your intelligence
The
that you're supplying to them. And they don't need your GUI, right? So they are making changes to ask you to supply those. So they are demanding those things. So in summary, your API ecosystem stakeholders can be divided into 4 main categories: your business stakeholders, your technical stakeholders, your API consumers who depend on your ecosystem, on your APIs, and last but not the least, your partners in the ecosystem. They're not necessarily your consumers, but they facilitate your products and services. In some cases, they are your R&D partner. In some cases, they are your business partner. So it's a collection of all of that. So let's look into those business stakeholders. Who are those people? So your business stakeholders are primarily 3 sets of people. People who own products, business unit leaders. They basically not necessarily are engineering the solution that is being done by your engineering team, but they actually own the business and they're asking you, these are the business requirements we need to support. Okay, so they are internally demanding from the engineering teams to build those APIs. So you own the API as a product, you are prioritizing features, you're ensuring APIs align with the business processes, either internally or externally, and they are essentially responsible for revenue. So they are the ones who are one of the primary stakeholders in this ecosystem. But then you have marketing teams. Okay, they are positioning because of this new phenomena of low-code, no-code development, because of the simplification of applications that customers are demanding more and more. And in many cases, if people have internally built chatbots and all that, perhaps they have to get rid of those because now ChatGPT gives you a better answer. So your marketing teams are also exposing your capabilities as an API, as a simplified solutions to the outer world, and they're driving adoption. That's important part. We have been onto some of the marketing calls. One way APIs are being used strategically is to expose them to your ecosystem, in which it's much difficult for somebody to start using your entire application in one go or in phases. The easiest way is they have just one single API, which is exposed by you, but has a very important piece of information. And they write this piece of code. Guess what? Now their product is dependent on you. It's not easy to get rid of this. Once it is creating value for you, it is widespread.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I got personally burned on this entire thing, because I built fraud analytics systems, and I'd sell them to the government to detect fraud in government payments. And I got called out by a CISO in the project. I'm not gonna mention what it was, but we would take GIAC, which is information about landlords who lives on a piece of property, and when a payment's going to a landlord from the government, we would call that API, and you could call that API for pennies. We'd be selling it upstream, much higher markup value-wise. As after a couple of years into a program, the CISO came out and was like, "You're charging us 100 times what we could just get from these people over here," and demanded we reduce our prices. And they went to the API company, and the API company's like, "We're going to have to charge you much more money. You're making so much money." And we're like, "But this is what you sold for. We're under contract." And they basically were like, "Which meant our project, our project would collapse just based on all this information."
Yeah.
And so we got burned on that. We had to basically pay more to this company in the middle of a contract with them, and they were going to cancel on us. So it happens.
Yep. Thank you for sharing that story. But multiply that with hundreds of products.
Right.
Multiply that with 2,000 developers around the globe. So one of the strategy.
In the context of today's discussion, I'm curious, were you in compliance with the contract that you had with that provider? Were you?
Oh, we definitely were. But it was one of those situations. It's so like ChatGPT today.
Right.
It's like they give it away for free, and it's they'll get some people using it, but it's so useful that people are building their businesses around it. And at some point, OpenAI is going to be like, it's going to be a little bit more
Right.
expensive.
And this is not a,
Your dependency has reached that threshold.
Yeah.
that is precisely the case study I will share with you regarding Facebook. Similar kind of strategy. And it is still, we will never know, is this, they're doing it purposely to kill the innovation, or they're doing it to see what competition does on their data and evolve from there. So interesting cases. But nonetheless, this is happening. Our lawyer friend is here, so he can appreciate this. Your legal compliance team is also a very important stakeholder. More or less, when you're building your APIs and exposing, okay, of course, your security guy is telling you we cannot expose this data publicly. We have to be careful. We are just exposing these pieces of information, and there is a strategy behind it. But this is more about exactly what Chad you described. Sorry, Chad, right? Not Matt. Sorry, I was calling you Matt earlier.
He's
You
been
can call
called
me
worse.
anything- You can call me anything you want.
I won't call you anything I want, but yeah. Chad and Matt.
We are recording.
So, legal compliance teams, people who care about, okay, well, are you using Google APIs? Okay, which ones? Google is giving it for free. Oh, well, it's free does not necessarily mean that you don't have obligations, very much like open source licenses. So what are the rate limits? Are we abiding by those rate limits? You don't want to use or abuse an API and suddenly you receive a bill. Okay, well, you went over 100,000 calls. Here is a bill for our 101th call, and here is $1 million bill. So you do not want those surprises. So as a matter of fact, my own introduction with API ecosystem came through a lawyer. He came up to me in my previous organization. He said, Balji, we know how to manage open source licenses. And it's a big team, like 100,000 developers. I'm not going to disclose the name of the company, but 100,000 developers, very big, large enterprise company. And they have a full-blown team conducting technical due diligence, license, IP evaluations, for which our open source components they're consuming. And they came up to me and said, I know how to read an Apache license. I know how to read a LGPL license or other restrictive licenses, but I don't know how to manage these APIs now. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is they don't have licenses. They have terms of services. They have privacy statements, which could change at any point in time. So let's say today I do the approval, and a month from now, or 2 months from now, Google change the terms of services. It's my obligation to go read what it is and be compliant with those. It's not their problem. They may inform you through a Twitter or through a update through their email, but it's my problem. So today I'm compliant, but they change the policy. Tomorrow I'm not compliant, but API is already gone. The product has started to depend on it. I cannot simply pull the API back and say, oh, you cannot use this. That was an eye-opening moment for me. I said, okay, how about we monitor these APIs? Balji, we have 5,000 APIs. And each of those vendors, 5,000 means 5,000 vendors. Each of those vendors have at least 2 agreements. Terms of services, privacy statement. And in many cases, they have many, many, many more.
Sure.
I cannot go read all of them. How do I know they changed? Do I go every day? Do I go check every 6 months? I can hire an army of people, but that's not very effective. Even if they tell me there is a change, what is that change? How do I know? So it's just a massive, massive problem. So legal compliance team are looking at those issues. Well, it's not a perfect world, we all know that, but the idea would be, okay, at least tell me there is a change, and then I can use some machine help, perhaps apply some NLP, apply some other context to understand what that change is and mitigate the risk. By the way, how's my speed? Am I going too slow, too fast? Are you guys liking it?
No, this is good. Yeah.
Good. Okay. How about online people? Are they?
They haven't said anything about the tempo, and Tim and I have just been able to answer most of the questions being
Any
posted right
questions for
here.
me?
Just stay.
Okay.
Somebody says tempo okay. and so
Yeah,
that-
tempo
we're all-
okay.
all-
All good.
Okay,
You can
cool.
read the other
so
one.
I will continue. Thank you. All right. So these are our business stakeholders. Now let me talk about the technical stakeholders. Obviously, not surprise, the API providers, the developers who are building those APIs, API management teams, platform teams that are managing those APIs. Now API is very much engineered code into your application, but then there are a whole bunch of mechanisms that allows you to execute that code, fetch your data from a database or somewhere else, and service that request. So there are platform teams that are managing those services. Then you have API architects like him. Actually, it matches your picture. That was just a coincidence. Look, if you look, I'm not kidding. Everybody is wearing something white. This is just a coincidence. Architects, serious people, very responsible. They have so much responsibility. So nevertheless, we have architects who are looking at this ecosystem and trying to understand what do I need to do from a holistic point of view. They're not just looking at this application. Developer concerns about, okay, this is the feature. I'm in a 2-week sprint. I need to deliver this and go on my holiday. Security tester is worrying about, okay, I'm going to run Postman or I'm going to run a pen test and be done with it. I'm just going to give a report and all that. But the entire team is responsible for delivering a solution that is holistically compliant, secure, manageable, and more importantly, just continuously serve the customers and partners in the best way. So these are your technical stakeholders. Consumers, so developers who are consuming your APIs. Let me ask this question. I'm walking away, but I'll speak louder. Why do we build APIs then?
Why do we, to take advantage of other people's data in our own products.
Very good. Who we are building it for?
It could be us, could be for our consumers.
Okay, very good. Mainly, we are not building these APIs, in many cases, for just internal. External people who will depend or use these APIs in many, many product services, perhaps creating more opportunities. So at the end of the day, these developers, if they don't like your APIs, they're not going to use it. Or they will look for alternates. For example, Bing Map versus Google Map. In many cases, there are no alternates, but the way the inventory of API is evolving, there are many, many solutions. If you want to fetch a stock exchange data, there are many APIs. If you want weather data, there are many APIs. Many companies provide that data. If you're looking for blockchain, cryptocurrencies, specific data, there are many, many companies provide those services. If you're looking at, there are certain APIs that are irreplaceable. For example, if you want SAP's ERP system data, that nobody else can give you, just SAP APIs.
Right.
But the point I'm trying to make is your APIs need to be loved by the developers. If they don't, then your API strategy falls apart. Your ability to make them dependent on your ecosystem fails if your APIs are not consumable, if you don't have documentation, if you don't know examples, how to integrate your APIs into this, even a small piece of code. So there are companies, believe it or not, that are built around that ecosystem. Postman is one of them, with the $1 billion evaluations and all that. So there are a lot of startups that are built into focus on developers, how we enable that API development ecosystem. How the documentation should be. When you're writing hundreds and thousands of APIs, it's not easy for you to document them. So can you document them through the code itself? What are the standards in which the APIs need to be developed? Okay, how do I declare variables? How do I authenticate? All those need to be informed to these developers. So your external, actually, I was explaining about external developers, so I should have. Then your end users, they are not necessarily consuming your APIs writing code, but they actually depend as a business user. So indirectly, stakeholders basically depend on the experience that you ultimately pass on to them. For example, your insurance app. Now, you as insurance company, you have integrated, let's say, some APIs that are providing product information about this API. But your end user is a person who's buying those policies, correct? They don't know these APIs, but in the back end, they have the experience of using those. So your end users are also very much part of this stakeholder. In your ecosystem, you have technology partners that are providing you various capabilities to extend your products and services to the external world. And third-party vendors. They manage your tools, your DevOps teams, your cloud systems, your other aspects that need to be managed as a partner. Then, last but not the least, the governance committees. This could be internal, these could be external, but people who are looking at the governance of those micro assets, the governance of those APIs, especially people with with business background, architects and project managers usually are part of these teams, and they're looking at a holistic view of how these APIs are being managed, which is the next topic I will talk. Okay. So far, what I've showed you is globally how APIs are making an impact onto enterprises. I talked about the enterprise API ecosystem, how it looks like. I've also talked about who are the stakeholders in those API ecosystems. Now I want to talk about what is the landscape of these API ecosystems, legal landscape. You might notice there is a slash between off and for. And it's not a spelling mistake. I purposely kept it there because I wanted to convey two messages. Can somebody figure out my English? What could be the reason?
I guess there's a difference between
Legal landscape of APIs, so there's really landscape.
APIs.
Can you elaborate? What?
Well, I'm just saying, that's what it means.
I think it may be between users and consumers, or
Very
users
good.
and producers.
Great
basically,
answer.
right?
Great answer. So when you are building APIs, you need to have your own legal framework through which you will govern the usage of your APIs by third parties. But at the same time, you also need to know the legal framework when you are consuming somebody else's APIs. So that's why for and off. So I'm going to talk about both.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about both. And there are subtle differences. In many cases, those differences are very vast.
Well, they're both looking at the same thing, but just different directions.
Yeah,
Correct.
different perspectives.
Correct. So here, I'm going to talk about various data privacy policies. I'm not a lawyer. I'm depending on him to
Filed
guide
on
me.
TV.
To guide me. If I make a mistake, please don't hesitate to point that out because that will give me an opportunity to learn more. So those parts, data privacy and aspects, are some of those are laws. So APIs are not exception. At the end of the day, APIs are nothing, but remember, they're providing data, right? Either raw data or intelligence piece of information, it doesn't really matter. So what are the ways by which they are being governed? So let's look into that. So I compiled a list of different laws that are enforced in the US. So this slide is specific to the US.
Okay.
In which more or less they're all applicable to the usage of APIs, or you have to keep in mind when you're building your APIs. There is no specific law built for APIs. They're talking about specific laws for AI usage now. In the US, we have an executive order. It came in
2021, I believe.
In Canada, we have IDA, AI data law. In Europe, we have EU law. So there are various legal frameworks coming up for the usage of AI. But if you look very carefully, at the end of the day, it's all about data governance, right? So what data you're exposing to your intelligence systems, at the end of the day, those intelligence systems are delivering their services through APIs. Because ChatGPT doesn't ship software to you, does it?
No.
If you want to integrate their intelligence, what do? You integrate their APIs in your application. So at the end of the day, the laws that I'm talking about indirectly are applicable to the APIs you're building and the APIs you're consuming. And because APIs are nothing but transacting data at the end, these are all applicable. So that's my philosophy to understand this ecosystem. So if you look at from very early on, there are already laws that require you to be compliant with privacy impact. So if you are launching a product or services, oftentimes you're required to conduct a privacy impact assessment. You have Financial Modernization Act of 1999. Then there are specific laws that are focused on protecting children. Again, the data specific to children. Then there are Consumer Protection Act specifically in the state of California, and so on and so forth. I'm not a lawyer, so I have not looked into the entirety of these laws, but these are something that I went through, looked into what is relevant in the context of API usage. So you're welcome to look into this in detail.
So if I'm hearing you right, it's obviously you got to know the data that's coming in and flowing through your environment. And historically, it's been what's the data we produce and send out. Now looking at that same thing through the lens of the API, and that data can be coming from multiple sources in other ways. But ultimately, it boils down, if it's like you and I have a product, we could be responsible for how our product adheres to everything you got listed here.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I can give an anecdote here from GDPR perspective. In GDPR, they identify two: data producers and data consumers. I don't know the term they're using, but both have equal responsibility. For example, you cannot say, oh, this is the data came from Google. Let's say somebody's private information came that you're using. You are equally responsible to protect it, regardless of who's the originator of this data.
Because the data came into your ecosystem.
Yes, because it came into your ecosystem. So you have pretty much the same obligations that you need to be compliant with.
Gotcha, yeah.
So this is something that is enforced upon enterprises, but enterprises have their own policies and mechanisms to control the API usages. But at the same time, this is also from a consumer point of view that you should be aware of. So what are the different legal frameworks that are available? You may have often seen privacy policies or data policies sometimes. Sometimes you have specific agreements or the legal documents that say global privacy policies. Because imagine a platform like Facebook or LinkedIn or other social media platforms. They are not just one solution. It's an ecosystem. There are businesses that are on top of that. And there are so many implications globally, and there are different laws they have to be compliant with. So they have platform policies. Now, you may have these platform, these data policies, but then you may have a specific policy for a specific API that you have built. So those are sometimes called API terms. So you, depending on how many APIs you have, each one of them may have their its own policies. Then of course you have, as I mentioned at the bottom, like Uber, Airbnb, they are like platforms. They are not just a single point solution. So they have different kinds of platform policies. By the way, did I miss anything here? This pretty much captures the enterprise world.
No, I think it captures it for me.
It does? Okay. So companies may call them differently, but this is the gist of it. This is the framework that enterprises are putting in place. Before I show the next slide to you, I want to ask you this question. What does come to your mind? Now, my hope is you better understand this ecosystem. You understand the assets, you understand the stakeholders, you understand the implications, you understand the framework under which we need to govern or be governed. Perhaps you understand that. What is the first thing that comes to your mind? The most important part.
Are your data being used?
What?
Most important legal framework for.
Yeah, the holistic, so far what we have covered so far. Now, what does come to your mind as a high level picture?
What do you mean? I'm not.
Not framework.
The element?
I'll give a hint.
Or is it ownership, for example?
Yeah.
Is it data?
One thing I think isn't up here.
Huh?
One thing that isn't up here,
Oh, okay.
which may be what you're talking about also, is it's policy around derivative use.
Policy
Because
around
every one of
derivative.
these refers to something very specific. It's about how you're collecting my data, how it complies with privacy laws like GDPR, CCPA. API terms is a legal agreement that might be covered under that.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
But like derivative usage, like in AI security policy is all about derivative usage.
Yeah.
And so like if you're just taking, if I'm using 5 APIs alone in a very standard way, but that's one thing. But if I take 5 results, mix it up, create something else that's
It's a new
pornographic,
product.
violent,
Yeah.
or then that's a derivative use, which does not, it's very gray how that works.
Yeah.
But so I'm not sure where that would fit in here.
It might be covered here.
Yeah, because
it's just one of those policies you will include there. No derivative or allowed, or it is allowed under these conditions. Yeah, but good point. As system becomes more complex, they evolve to become more complex. I see this list being expanded. There might be new terms that our lawyer friends will come up with. Oh, well, this needs to have its own specific legs. It is not for some reason covered under this. There are other things like SLAs and all that, which I'm not mentioning here, but those are standard, well understood. But this is in the context of APIs. And the point you made is perhaps covered here.
Yeah.
So I'm not specifying the details.
Stop doing what you were doing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm saying like in ChatGPT, I like, I'm a heavy user of ChatGPT and OpenAI. And like, I will create I've created like 100 different images of things.
Yeah.
And you can create an image that is somewhat like, how do you say, it's not violent, it's not suggestive of anything.
Yeah.
ChatGPT will be, that's fine, you can make that image. But if you add like a knife to the created image, completely violates our policy for usage and derivation.
Yeah.
And you're like, why? Like why? I mean, you just added like one little element to it, and you've broke the terms of a usage contract.
But that's a very gray area. I don't know if there is anybody has a answer to that question. Maybe let's take our lawyer friends' opinion. What do you think if somebody creates an art from AI system and adds its own creativity on top of that? What does law tell us?
To make it really difficult is only by the copyright. So if you don't have the right either because they gave you a license the work independently created it, you can't make that derivative.
You cannot.
You can't, with some exceptions for
Fair use.
fair use, which is pretty narrow. It certainly doesn't include any commercial use.
Well, like, here's an example, like, it was my son's birthday, a couple weeks ago, and my son's sort of a leftist at University of California. And so I made him a ChatGPT image of him as Che Guevara. I said, make him a leftist militant, put a rifle in his hand, and put a bunch of like communist manifestos, just like a joke or whatever, and it's a happy birthday son, his name's Lyndon, so I said, Lyndon Guevara. And then I tried it, and I said, make him into Che Guevara. And I was like, nope. I said, but he just made him into Che Guevara. It's exactly like him here. The only thing I did was change one little phrase. I went stylize. You could stylize it like Che Guevara, and that was acceptable. And the next one was like make them like Che Guevara. I was like, nope, can't do it. And it's like, so it's really weird. Like you have to be very particular about the words you use. And then you see this too, like OpenAI banned any politicization of images they created. If you go in there and just say the word stylized like somebody, it'll do it. It's just doing the exact same thing.
And I've seen stories or articles where it's the same thing, but say somebody's trying to make an explosive.
Exactly.
Or things along those lines,
There he is, right there. He's a revolutionary, but if you said, and I said, stylize that picture like Che Guevara in one hand, and he made it. And all I did was the next one, I just said, make him into Che Guevara, and it said, nope, can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's a lot of things where people will share how they've worked around that.
Yeah. There's whole websites out there for how to work around and get what you want done. Don't break the rules.
But from the legal point of view, I appreciated the comment that I actually.
Would you mind sharing that, repeating that to the people
comment
online?
he made is that the art created by AI system is copyrightable. You cannot change it. So, for example, in your case, you cannot create an image of a person.
Well,
AI will not.
in the US, that's not true. Copyright is held by individuals, and the few court cases that there have been recently have denied copyright for an AI-generated image. It's a very current legal issue because a machine-created art is not subject to copyright protection.
So you're saying that what Chad was able to create, he could not copyright that?
So this is actually a really complicated thing. The question is, did Chad put in a copyright cognizable amount of creativity?
No.
He did.
Just kidding.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't think so in that context, but you could change the facts and create something that's more difficult. The question starts though with where is ChatGPT getting that art? Because if it's regurgitating something, the fact that it may not track it doesn't matter. If Getty or one of the commercial licensors, in this case, it's a personal use, nobody will ever find out. But let's say that your son has his own, his own followers. He's got 10 million followers. He posts that, so he's making money off of his followers. And he posts that, look at how great my dad is. He gets me. And everybody posts that. Yeah, that's great. But now
Whatever, $500,000 out.
and then he sends you cease and desist that says, that's actually copied from our work, here it is, and you owe us money. You have, this is the challenge of generative AI is really just regurgitation AI. It's not creating its own new stuff. And so where it's getting all of this from and how if it's using the non-copyrightable elements and putting things together on its own, you're okay. But you don't really know how the machine works, and you don't know what claims can come out if you commercialize whatever you get from it.
Right.
It's like an intellectual property.
Yeah, absolutely. And copyright law is, patents, at least there has to be a patent filed, people have to be willing to have very expensive litigation. Copyright law is self-implementing, and almost cost-free and easy to recover some damages. So for companies, this has become a big issue, right? Because a company doesn't use generative AI for its day-to-day marketing, HR, all the things that, you know, it can save money on output. And we're talking about art, but it could be words as well. If it sucks in private information, the machine isn't cleansing it of its copyright protection.
Right, and that's what I'm thinking for
Yeah,
how the chat GPTs will
right.
scan books or
Yeah.
textbooks. And
Well, and the scanning itself, you know, is the subject of a number of lawsuits right now because there was no right to scan. And the cases so far that have claimed fair use for that have lost.
gotcha. Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is an art produced by AI for which I paid, for example, license fee for using ChatGPT, I cannot take that art and modify it, add my own creativity, and sell that art
No,
as my own.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying you don't know if you can. It's because the ChatGPT, if you created it lawfully, so it didn't infringe on anybody's copyrightable elements. The license, I don't believe that any of the big generative AI machines claim ownership of what they produce. And so this is really just a matter of you have a contract with them because since the machine is meant to be, it's not going to be protected by copyright law.
And I can add on that, they specifically state at your own risk when it comes to the liability on that
There you
side.
go.
That's a
Yeah.
standard statement they make here.
That's the standard AI.
Yeah, they're like, sorry, we don't know if it's copyrighted. We know it is, but it's your problem. You figure
You
it out.
figure it out.
But they are relieving themselves from any issues that you can go after them, because you created something upon which you cannot go after them. You cause damage, business damage to me. That for that reason they're protecting themselves. But my question goes one step further. If you start making money, as he said, can they come after you because you added something on top of what they created for which you already paid them? But can they go after you that you took my art, modified it, and sold it, and you're making money out of it?
Well, if the pockets are deep enough, they can try. It's kind of the American way.
Yeah.
You know?
I guess we can summarize this discussion. It's still a gray area. I'm
Mhm.
very tempted to ask another question, but I think we'll proceed, but keep it in a Q&A towards the end. The reason why I stopped there and we got distracted with the other, but these are very useful discussions. This was the picture I wanted to, I was asking you to guess. At the end of the day, it is all about data governance, because all your data assets that are there upon which you have these bulbs that are exposing data, you need to govern them. And this could be a picture of an enterprise moving forward. This is a real picture of we, as a company, we track APIs. So we are seeing where these APIs are popping up. So as you can imagine, majority of them are on the East Coast, some on the West Coast, some in Mexico or there, some in India, China, Australia, Singapore. So these are the APIs that we are seeing globally. This is not the entire list of APIs, but this is very much an enterprise picture these days.
How do you delineate enterprise?
How do I define enterprise?
Yeah, like what did those have to do to get a dot on your map versus other ones?
These are APIs we are tracking.
Okay.
For example, this dot tells me there is an API provided by a company, whatever the company is.
Got it.
And let's say if I was an enterprise using all these APIs, this is my picture.
Of your data sources.
Yeah, exactly. When you pose a question, let's say you are a bank and you're using AI system to process your documents, mortgage applications, because that's one of the things people are doing now. Faster application of NLP techniques. When you give your application, where is it being stored?
Right.
And where's the data being stored?
Yeah, exactly. Your input, where is it being stored? If you're processing images, where are they being stored? In the case of medical companies, these could be MRI images for which you are using a sophisticated AI system that is determining brain tumor, part of your brain. So where is it being stored? I will show you cases in which it's very common for companies to be registered in the US or in Canada, but have their DevOps operations in India or in China.
Oh,
or
sure.
Korea, because of cost-cutting reasons.
You have a data residency.
But data residency shouldn't be outside of the US, and this is why, I mean, not to say for everybody,
Yeah.
but certain banks and other institutions for a digital bank, we do not permit data to be hosted outside of the US, even if you have vendor services or other, development teams in India or China. They can access securely the data, but the data must be hosted in the US. And I think that's driven by a lot of these legal privacy and
It is, and that's what we do.
so we don't have that cross-border. data.
That's right, our offshore teams access the VDI. They don't store anything on their local computers, they can't print, they have to shut off the USB connections.
Exactly,
Yeah, completely agree to those points. But that's a relationship between you and vendor. If you're having a third-party vendor, you tell them our data must be stored here. Or if this is your internal team, the DevOps team, make sure that the server is being spun off in the US somewhere, physically located. But the point is, the way this API economy is being what's the word?
Scaled.
Not scale, but pervasive. So pervasive. It's very easy, coming back to your example where you guys amalgamated that API because that API was so valuable, free API, people build companies around it. For example, a lot of companies are built on top of Facebook. They simply take their data, they take LinkedIn data, they take other social media data, there you go, there is a startup, right? They don't have those kind of infrastructures. They're running on AWS, to keep their cost minimum, they're putting up servers wherever they want to. But then a large enterprises, you said very rightly, will do all the due diligence, but it's not uncommon to make those mistakes. Where you, making an API call takes only 4 or 5 lines of code. That's it. And that API call includes your input and an output that you're expecting that is being consumed down flow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's very easy for enterprises to make these mistakes. It's not very uncommon. And that is the reason my lawyer firm wanted to govern all that. What's the terms of services, where it is being stored, and conducting this due diligence is not easy. Unless until it takes you months and months of vendor onboarding and SLAs in place and all that to make sure that they support it.
But here's the other thing, right? Those SLAs and all that and vendor onboarding and so on is a point in time.
It's what?
It's a point in time.
Yeah, it is.
So you do not know what your vendors are doing tomorrow or the next day or the next day.
Correct.
Well, you do have your contract.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
but that's like the health rating at a restaurant.
Well,
It's
the data though, and my vendor, to your point, takes an MRI scan and does an API, returns it, and they're storing the derived image on a server somewhere. They're going to get sued if that is stored somewhere overseas. I mean, it's going to get caught. So I mean, it can happen. I'm not saying it can't happen because it can happen any second. A person could make a mistake and they're storing data here, and now it's in a S3 bucket in Brazil or something.
Exactly.
But so I understand those mistakes happen, but any legitimate company that's building their reputation in the United States around any kind of governed data, I mean, by policy and by contract, they should be following the framework. If it's HIPAA, it's HIPAA. It has to be in the United States. Sure, a mistake can happen, but are they doing it maliciously just to save money?
Well, there's another dimension. So we support many multinationals, and lawyers try to pick each other's pockets, right? That's just the contract negotiations we have. And when you're dealing with multinationals and multinational data, so you get a contract that says that you'll just comply with all the laws. That may wind up that for your customers' Brazilian data, you're opening up operations in Brazil. And for Canada, you're opening up operations in Canada because they may not be able to expatriate that data. But that's not what's going on at the negotiation level. You're talking at a high level, and then afterwards they say, oh, we have a bunch of these businesses in China that can't get you the data, you gotta put facilities in China, and that's what that one sentence says.
Yeah.
So you have to be really careful, because from a US perspective, there aren't generally US prohibitions on offshoring data. Medicaid has there are some financial limitations, but in general, there are not legal prohibitions like the GDPR, which doesn't say it's illegal. What the GDPR says, if you're talking about transferring data to another country for which the EU hasn't determined adequate assurances of privacy, you have to take certain actions. So the offshoring of data is a much more complicated issue that generally for most companies is just driven by contracts.
Yeah, that HIPAA case too, on other countries.
Absolutely can, there's no prohibition.
There's no prohibition on HIPAA, because all the HIPAA projects I've ever dealt with always have data rustles.
Operationally, insurance-wise, but in terms of the regulations and statute that comprises HIPAA, there's no prohibition. There are conditions. So as an example, if you offshore data, you have to have your contractor agree to the jurisdiction of HHS.
Yes.
But that's different than saying it's illegal. It's not.
Wow, you've opened my eyes. I mean, well, I did not.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
I thought you had data residency, because I mean, I got called on audits for, where it's like, what are you doing? Your data's held in the AWS. It's being replicated, geo-replicated for storage purposes. I wasn't using it operationally, but it's geo-replicated and it goes into Canada, and they're like, you can't do that. I mean, so I guess maybe it's not illegal, but like most of my background is in NIST and NIST RMF would absolutely not be able to operate that program. You get no authorization, your authorization would be pulled immediately. So I mean, maybe it's not illegal, but under NIST 853, which what governs everything that.
But so even under this framework though, if that is your resiliency and you communicate that to your customers, the public whose data you may have is informed of that, that's not illegal.
Wow.
And it wouldn't even be inappropriate. Canada has way better privacy laws than America has, much more restrictive.
Wow,
What do they have to opt in though, the customer on that? Like if they have resiliency or redundancy elsewhere outside of
It
the
all depends. In HIPAA, there's no opt-in. They can insist, and there's no opt-out, it's a contract issue. Which is why most big companies now, in addition to the business associate agreement, are using information security agreements.
like exhibits and stuff
Yeah.
that say you must host data within the United States.
But that's why they have to have that there,
Right.
because without it, there isn't.
There's no law,
prohibition.
yeah.
So if you look at,
Interesting.
like, our customers, lab, request, Mayo Clinic, Mayo, we have 20-page ISA, and that drills into all the detail that HIPAA doesn't have. I don't know if you saw at the end of last year, there was a notice of proposed rulemaking to get the detail that like financial regulations have. Now with the new administration, the general sense is it's dead and it's not going to happen because the industry reacted very negatively. But if you read it, it really wasn't any different than like New York State's financial integrity and security laws. So what companies are doing now is all the big companies have their own addendums that go on top of your contract, and that's where you find the real restrictions.
Yeah, that's what we do, but I didn't realize, like, to your point, that it wasn't like prohibited by the
Yeah.
law. It's just really the companies demanding that, so.
I got a law school.
That brings me to the summary of this point. I was not, to your point, I was not pointing to the fact that they will purposely do this. But the point I was trying to make was, it is much easier for a DevOps person to make a mistake. You would never know this. Why? Because the URL never changes, because it is just pointing to a service that you're calling in your software. But underneath, they have moved the server to some other location. For whatever reasons, I don't know. And that happens.
And I don't disagree, yeah.
it can happen internally, it can happen with external teams. In some cases, you would never know. Yeah.
Well, even like when you had the earlier slide where it showed what the URL is, and then there's the other stuff behind the green curtain,
Yes.
you know, that we don't know or we don't have control
Yes.
of.
Yeah.
You know.
That is the point I was making.
Okay, that's what I thought you were. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to this point. So this is your app. Your app will never know that this particular server that this is hosted has moved.
Right. It doesn't know what's happening
You would
on
know.
the other side of that one green line.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's the difficulty. And this happens all the time because API is very much like products. They have versions now. Because now suddenly they have new business requirements. They want to support another field that they're responding back.
Right.
For that, they are moving on to another system. And suddenly they or maybe this is a API that is not specific to you, right? It is specific to a partner ecosystem. But these are something that requires us constant monitoring, auditing, and making sure that we discover, we do the assessment. Okay, so just catching up on time.
I'm sorry, when you talking about constant monitoring, you're monitoring the code of the API or the activity?
Activity. Yeah. In some cases, for example, she talked about discovery because your code may evolve as well. So you have new code snippet or you have new applications added. Those you may not be able to detect. You may be able to detect the ones that you have already accounted for, but if newly are added, then you need to monitor those as well. Okay, so that brings us to the last point before we take a break. We are a little bit behind, but that's okay. I'll speed up. So what I want to do next is talk about various APIs, types of APIs that require these various types of internal discussions. This is internal, this is external, this is partner, this is commercial, this is free, and we need policies accordingly. So let's look into some of those aspects. It's not uncommon, you don't have just one type of API. You have various kinds of APIs internally. If your inventory is hundreds of thousands, if not thousands today, but it could be very much in thousands moving forward, then you may see these, internal, external, partner, and in some cases unknown as well. Unknown since you don't know they existed because of sources, because of the companies you bought, because of some developer just end up putting up an API just for one use case and nobody knew that this is being done. But nonetheless, you still need all those controls that I'm talking about. Where the data is hosted, who owns these APIs, who are the stakeholders, what are the underlying issues and whatnot. So that brings me to the next topic, which is the different kinds of licensing models that are being put in place for managing these APIs. We can divide them into two main categories. One is commercial API licensing models, and the other one is open source API licensing models. So let's look into what are some of the typically available licensing models for API usage. So one is developer tiered plans, which means depending on what exactly you are doing with the API that you're providing, you have various tiered systems. For example, the tiering system could be based on number of calls, based on the functionality of the API. So various mechanisms can be adopted for developing a tiered plan. Then you may have a usage-based plan. For example, if you call 100, or even simple example, every time you call my API, you give me 1 cent. Or you give me $1. Okay, so it's like electricity. So the more you use it, the more you pay. Right. You pay as you go. The other one is subscription-based license model, which means you pay one time. So for example, the user pays a monthly recurring fee and has full access to whatever the defined limits or the services that it is supposed to pay. Perpetual license. You pay for your API usage. as a one-time fee for the entire period. It's not subscription, but perpetual for the life cycle of the project that you have. Or in some cases, you have outcome-based licenses. This is very interesting. Again, I will welcome your comments, but have you guys tried outcome-based licenses or some form of outcome-based licenses in your experiences?
No.
Have you considered it? Did you hear about it?
No.
You never heard about it. You did? What was your use case?
That is our industry. In
That is
medical
the-
billing, you charge based on the revenue or collections that your customer
Oh,
incurs.
okay.
So that's how we get paid.
And how do you quantify that? Do you have
Our system does the billing.
Kind of like royalties.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it like a commission also? Can you have revenue sharing?
I don't think it's commission because we get paid and they do it also. It's more like a royalty.
Okay.
We just get paid a share.
Yeah. Okay. The reason why I'm saying this is one prospect actually asked us. In cybersecurity, everybody knows that there are too many false positive problems. One of the typical problem with many security tools is false positives, and developers are sick and tired of this. There's a vulnerability, but there is no vulnerability. In some cases, it misses the vulnerability. So no tool is perfect. So we have a lot of false positive problems. And security industry in particular cares about it because you're creating these false alarms, which nobody cares, and suddenly one vulnerability seeps in and impacts your entire ecosystem. So that's a huge issue. So what I was posed with this question, are you willing to give us this on value-based, which means if you discover an API, then only we pay you. Otherwise, we don't pay you. Doesn't really matter what do you scan. Do you scan my network? Do you scan my applications? But I won't pay you if you don't discover anything. Well, that was a very tough question, but that's what this talks about. I don't have experience with other industries, but in particularly with API-based products, I've been posed this question: can you give us an outcome-based license?
Did you take it?
No, we did not. It was too difficult for us to monetize it because they were talking about scanning their hundreds of applications,
Right.
hundreds of networks. Because it's like hiring somebody to organize a warehouse and then paying them only if I sell my merchandising. How is it fair? I'm still managing your inventory,
Yeah.
putting it accountable. Whether you are making money out of those APIs, it's not my business.
I can't control it.
I can't control it. So but again, what I'm sharing with you is people are demanding these kind of models with APIs.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, well, the amount of overhead you would have to invest just to get to a point to see if there is
Correct.
any revenue from outcome.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And meanwhile, they're benefiting from the knowledge that you're giving them, because if you come back and go, well, you don't owe me anything because this is what we found, you've just done all of that for free.
Yeah. But eventually we learned, and that's precisely what we did moving forward in our future engagements. We basically proposed a model in which we had a base price, but then we said, okay, any API we discover, then there is a price on top of it.
Right.
Which sounded more fair to them, and that's how the discussion
I
went.
was able to proceed.
But then there are project-based licensing where you provide temporary licenses. When the project is done, you shut off your API usage. And there are trial licenses, academic licenses, and last but not the least, we are all familiar with enterprise licenses. There is no set term for enterprise licenses. This is again based on negotiations, getting into each other's pocket and deciding what needs to be done, and that's what enterprise
Licensing is.
For the open source licensing models, I should not say open source license, maybe just open licensing, open API licensing. It basically is driven from the fact that there are, for open source, there are various types of licenses. They can be broadly classified into copyleft license, permissive license, public domain license, or customizable license. He's the expert in this area actually. So copyleft licenses basically force you to, if you use a product, basically you have to make that product where you are using somebody else's product also available, make it available on the same terms. So that is what this
Oh, you have to play it forward.
exactly, yeah, paid forward. Yeah. Permissive licenses, they are more flexible, you can allow, but they want you to do attribution. They want you to acknowledge that you're doing it. Many of these are still continue to be applicable to when you are providing SDKs or providing software that is implementing your APIs to your partner. But also I'll talk about the terms of services, which is another issue other than these licenses. But then there could be customized, you don't know what you're dealing with. There could be just a one-liner, which is a one-line license, but that could be something you want to pay attention to. Okay, break. 2 p.m.
Okay.
Halfway through.
There's one, if you go, well, it's the next set of buildings up, it's about 4 or 5 minute walk. Yeah, it's like,
Just before you go,
you can drive there in 2 days.
just before you go, I just want to give you a quick peek what I'm going to do next. So that if you have to plan your things, if you're planning to come back, this is what I plan to cover. So considerations for API producers, talk about the API consumers, and then some hands-on practical exercises that you will be using. So maybe 10 minutes break.
Sure.
I'm running out, jumping on the line. So I'll come back.
Yeah. All good. I'm gonna
40 minutes, and then we'll take another 5-10 minutes break.
Cool.
And then we'll wrap up. All right, so before we went to the break, before this break, we covered the basis of the legal framework, the landscape of APIs, legal framework, and the different types of APIs that need to be managed, for which we need different types of frameworks. Now we want to focus on API producers.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Do you know how much is the market value of API, like approximately?
Which API? By who?
Like the whole API market.
The whole API?
Yeah. $1 billion. So we're talking billions, like tens of billions.
A lot.
Definitely billions.
Probably
Yeah, a lot.
Probably hundreds of billions.
Let me see if I can answer that question.
No, and dude, it's a really good question. What we were chatting about was just how immature the whole industry of this is. It's always going to be financially driven, where governance and everything comes in afterwards. And I think we're just still in that stage. Well, can I ask you a question, and then I'll have you try to best answer that? When you were doing what you do at TeejLab, on average, how knowledgeable is the prospect that you're speaking with on APIs, or where they're at in a level of maturity for their organization?
So different prospects we engaged, they were at different level. But
Sure.
if I average all of them on a scale of 1 to 10, 4. They were on average. So they are somewhat, there are some aspects, but I would say the maturity is not there.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, especially the discovery problem that she was talking about. I think she acknowledged that that's a huge problem for them. But when you go talk to these prospects, tell them, hey, look, we can do this due diligence and you would know all your APIs. Oh, the often answer would be, oh, we don't have unknown APIs. Also, well, how do you know? Let me show you proof of concept. But this is a typical answer you would get. But then the work doesn't stop there. Once you discover, then it becomes an obligation on them too, right?
Right.
So they have to.
Yeah, that just takes away ignorance.
Correct.
Yeah.
Not only that, but now they have something they have to act upon.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, you're no longer ignorant. So what are you
Yeah.
going to do about it?
Correct.
Kind of thing. Now, as you roll it up to that 4, and this is just my curiosity, do you find where it kind of like we'll find in an information security program versus an API program, those levels of maturity and awareness will vary greatly as well. But a lot of it's driven by the industry. You know, if it's financial, you know, or medical, it's going to be more mature than manufacturing.
That's true. So depending on the industry, depending on the stakeholders, their own exposure to other cybersecurity practices, not just the API governance, there could be some parallels. It need not be a separate program for API governance. It could be part of the larger ecosystem that you already have in place. So I'm not sure if your question is, how do we address that gap? Is that the motivation behind?
Just more an identification of the gap?
Okay.
Because, I mean, in full transparency, in my previous role, a majority of the clients are small to mid-sized organizations, which get quantified as between 50 and 2,500 employees.
Okay.
So we would run into various levels of maturity of the program that they have, and things along those lines. But then if you take that same conversation and transition it to, okay, holistically, what are you doing with APIs? Just no idea. No, you know, I mean, you could ask some of them that were in manufacturing and say, can you give me an inventory now of your assets?
Yeah.
You know, just depends. You know, I can give you some things, but if you went for APIs, you could just cry uncle.
Yeah.
That's a very typical situation with
Got it.
But coming back to your question, it's definitely in billions. It's in many cases, let's see if I can go back to that. It was some,
Right here.
it was actually part of my previous workshop. Yeah, so this is the total estimated value that APIs create in today's digital economy.
$2 trillion.
How did I compute this?
Well,
I looked at these numbers and what APIs do in those industries. So this is specific to the US. Each industry, how many employees they employ, how much revenue they generate, or so based on that, you could estimate
so
the
the percentages, how much the APIs contribute to the total GDP? Or what's the percentage?
No, these are specific to this industry. This is not. This
That's
is
what the industry represents.
correct. So this is what industry represents. And this is what APIs do to enable that. So in a way, there's an indirect relationship that because these APIs are so important for this industry, that's what they make. Of course, I mean, this is a extrapolated information.
you can have.
You can never have really quantified value. You have to just do some estimates, some methodology you have to apply to quantify.
Hey, and I don't know if you saw in one of Baljit's earlier workshops, I think it's 83% of internet traffic. Got it.
I'm not sharing the screen, or it is.
No, it's, yeah.
Oh, no, you're not.
It dropped for a minute.
Yeah,
So share the screen back.
thank you for catching that.
Still not.
Yeah, I'm going to share now.
Now you should be able to see.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, so now we're going to focus on API producers. And the first thing I'm going to focus on is monetization. There are organizations are building APIs not just for monetization. There are other objectives as well. But nonetheless, for API producers' point of view, if they're monetizing it, these are the two ways in which they're monetizing. You know, direct monetizations and indirect monetization ways. So direct is, as I mentioned, on the licensing models. In the same spirit, we have pay-as-you-go model. Then we have subscription model, freemium model, which means you build APIs, you let developers build applications on top of that, consume those APIs and depend on them. And this is a model that a lot of enterprises have adopted, like Google, Facebook. Sometimes they give you those APIs, free access up to a certain number of calls. They give you
For free, but then
they want you to pay once you go beyond a certain
limit.
Then they have also quota-based or bucket-based monetization models, or also transaction-based. Charges are applied for each transaction. So basically, depending on what industry you are, this is mainly applicable for the dollar value of transaction. Revenue sharing based, this is a question I was asking earlier. For example, if your API is providing certain value or enabling certain sales, you might be sharing that revenue as one of the models. Enterprise licensing, again, large scale users pay a substantial fee for enterprise access, customization, and detailed support. Then you have affiliate model, which means you take your API, you don't monetize it directly, but you put into somebody else's ecosystem. And they sell it or they use it. And then they basically enable the monetization for you. Pay for ad-free content, which means they don't pay you, but you basically push advertisements onto their platform. So there are these various models that you could see. Indirect API monetization models consist of again free model, but there you will not necessarily charging them, but you're building your brand. Just like he was saying, look, that API was very good, it created so much value, but now he's recognizing that brand for the rest of his life. But also, but also you have you could explore new markets. So you are giving it for free to some partner, but that you don't have access to that partner's market or the ecosystem they play in. You're just a new entrant, nobody cares about you. But then through them, by providing free model, you have access to new markets and perhaps think about new monetization strategies. Internal monetization is also, I've seen happening. It's not necessarily monetization, but it's a value creation. For example, one department needs annual reports. Instead of they sending their reports every month or every year, they basically build a bunch of APIs that the rest of the department can use or other departments can use. So you're creating value, you're creating efficiency in the system, and that's how you are monetizing. I've seen cases in which internal teams transact dollar values as well. They have budgets, and from those budgets, they're paying them for these kind of API usages. So that's another model which is
indirectly being applied.
B2B partner enablement is when you have integrations with your customers that facilitate expansion of your products and hence the revenue opportunity.
As well.
Privileged data access is the one in which you have not built an API for the entire world, but you have a specific piece of information that is important to one or two customers. So you are giving them privileged access, and based on that, you're monetizing this. Or, for example, if you have a licensing agreement or a subscription agreement with a certain company, and they say, okay, we'll give you, $30,000 more value if you build these APIs for us that facilitates our integration. So in a way, those APIs are generating indirectly the revenue for them. And also you have paid partners, which are essentially driving traffic for you in the larger ecosystem. So basically, you might have seen with advertisements, you have clicks. So every time you click, there is a counter that these companies are looking into, especially in the advertisement model, and then they are paid based on it. So they have not built these APIs directly for you to pay them, but it's based on the usage that they have enablement in your ecosystem for which they are willing to pay. So typical API that they are counting. So now the other two aspects. How did I miss this?
The slide. Where did my slide go?
Okay, looks like I missed one slide. So any API ecosystem, there are four main objectives. I had a slide which talked about those four objectives. One of them clearly was monetization. You're building APIs as a producer of those APIs to monetize your ecosystem, monetize your data, monetize your assets, whatever you do. What are some of the other reasons why you would be building APIs?
Just to simplify your own operations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in an automation.
Yeah.
Automation. You saw this.
Yeah. What else?
Knowledge sharing, actually.
Close enough to what I have on the slide, but yeah, close enough. There's one more. So monetization, automation,
Knowledge sharing.
knowledge sharing. There's one more. Huh? Volume. Can you describe?
Like instead of sending like SFTPs or, that was the precursor to API, something like that.
Yeah.
I guess that could fit under automation.
Yeah, it is more of automation, making things more efficient. Yeah, it's automation.
Would scalability fall under automation?
Scalability, yes.
Okay. Then I don't know.
It's more partners or partnership.
Growing your ecosystem. Yeah. So let's see if I have. How did I miss that slide? It's there. I know it's there.
Oh, somebody on a line submitted performance.
Performance. Okay.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt very quickly to see where did that slide
It disappeared.
Just
Just very quickly.
I will share this.
Oh,
Enrich customer experience. That's a lot of slides, man.
Yeah, but it ends here. So these are some of the slides. I just keep it to answer questions like the one he posed.
Sure.
Just to be ready, just to be ready with my facts.
Keep your stories straight.
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyways, it's on my, it's coming here, so I'll just go back.
And reduce human errors. Somebody, gentleman shared.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about automation first. Here is the automation scenario. Why are you building API? So in this scenario, same story I just shared with you that, developers saying, look, I have to send these reports every time our partners are asking us. I have to send them CSV reports. The advice is, why don't we build APIs so that they can directly expose? Most importantly, we can track the usage of our data. When you send somebody data, you don't know what they're doing with the data, right? How long they used it, what are they using it, and so on and so forth. But with APIs, you can track the usage of your data, how it is being used. Perhaps not how it is being used, but when it is being used.
Right, right.
So that is
and you have that inventory. Yeah. Oh, you're not sharing the screen again.
Sorry. It's good.
So you and the previous slide was monetization, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So monetization, which is the primary factor, but other than that, equally important is automation.
Does being able to fire people fall under monetization?
Firing people fall under
I think
monetization.
you're
Yeah.
saying reducing headcount, right?
Same thing.
A nice
Yeah.
way
I
to-
think
nicer way
automation-
to say it, maybe.
Well, I'm not in HR.
Firing people will fall under automation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ouch.
No, there was actually an article I was reading yesterday where Google was slashing like 200 jobs because they were able to automate and they attributed it more to advancements in AI versus not so much API, but yeah, 200 people were being let go.
Absolutely, and you look at the global picture. So paralegals who are documenting, filing, or perhaps making notes, I think those kind of jobs will disappear. Bookkeeping, accounting is already being supported, but many of those jobs will, or at least not disappear, but very much assisted by these tools.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so the next was simplification. So monetization, automation, simplification. Can somebody spin a story based on simplification? It's written there, but let's see if you can have your own story. Why APIs are also about simplification? We already talked about it.
Yeah, well, even like you were sharing earlier, maybe there's a client that doesn't like the interface.
Correct. Correct. That's precisely what I'm saying. We have too much data on our dashboards. And then the proposal is, why don't we just simply build APIs and let people consume whatever data they want so that we are not making our dashboards cluttered with all the data that is useful. So they can use whatever they want to use.
And they can put it in their existing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can embed them in workflows, much simplified way, and they can, most importantly, this will create dependency.
Well, then you also have a customization scenario, right? by adding the other fields that you want. Maybe Dave wants certain fields, I want other fields.
Correct.
But they each draw from the same
API.
data set.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And APIs are very much modular, and they adopt the philosophy of software engineering, which inherits those principles of modularization, but also exactly what you described. You get what you're asking for. So graphical, for example, it's a special type of API in which the inputs are not fixed. For example, Google Maps. What is the input? Address, start address, end address. But imagine an API in which you are able to give a unstructured query, not just input and output of street address and all address, and then the system finds something for you to make a recommendation. So those type of APIs also exist.
Can you think of an example of that?
Instead of your input as fields, your input itself is a query. And you're
Okay.
asking the API, can you answer this query? So API is flexible enough to understand your query and collect the data it needs, rather than me deciding what the API should always respond based on what my inputs are.
Gotcha.
That is why it is called graphical query.
Okay.
So API itself is a query answering mechanism. In REST APIs, most of the cases, your inputs are rigid, fixed. And for those fixed questions, it gives the fixed setup. Of course, the answers are dynamic, latest to the current time, but it does not have the flexibility to give you data that it was not imagining.
Right.
But there are APIs where you submit your input as a query rather than a fixed set of data you're asking. And then the query engine decides what data it needs to collect and give it back to you.
So it's almost like AI in a way, but there would be a different
It doesn't
source.
have that intelligence. You can imagine the scope is larger there.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm saying is you're kind of throwing out a query to an existing data set.
Correct.
And in that scenario, it's similar, but what could be happening on the back end, whether it's manipulating something or producing something based on its knowledge set, would be different.
Yeah,
but
that's a good thought. Right now, the current state of those graphical API is they are a bit more flexible on the query that you're asking, but the scope in which they are collecting their answer is still fixed.
Right. Yeah. It would be that data source.
Correct.
Yeah.
But now you have added actually another thought. Could that be even more intelligence on the fly? Could it produce in the process of answering the question, synthesize certain things to artificially add additional piece of data that could answer your question?
Yeah, and that's where
And that's where it can become even more intelligent.
Got it.
But that's what we are heading into. That's the future where we have almost invisible software, but doing things in the back end. And this is all geared towards the automation. Now, when you are asking for how many times we go collect weather information manually, there are APIs that are fetching that information and displaying it to you. So it's more built for machine-to-machine communication. And that's how the APIs will see moving forward, continue to add value. Where this house needs to connect to, I don't know, weather temperature or other coffee machines and see, what needs to be supplied. So that's where a lot of automation is happening with APIs.
Well, and it makes me think of like medical devices and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this is another motivation why APIs are being built to provide simplification.
And somebody online did add simplify code development.
Yeah, so very much like this. The last piece, which you indicated, share, I put this in this category, democratization. So a lot of governments, organizations around the world have open data policy. Even the US government has an open data policy. So if you go to US various departments like Veteran Affairs, Homeland Security, not so much Homeland Security, but other departments, agriculture and all, they have built a lot of APIs on their ecosystem. Of course, their motivation is not necessarily democratization, but enabling US economy. Because imagine all the innovative products that developers can think about.
Right.
Looking into these forms of data. So 10 years ago, they started building, Canada has a similar policy, India has a similar policy. So all these government departments are opening up their data. Within enterprises, it also opens up democratization scenario. For example, if you are sitting on a, let's say you are a, I don't know, like a John Deere. Like you have amazing amounts of data from your machines,
Right.
from weather patterns and all that. Imagine all that data becomes available to for machine intelligence, diagnosis of machines,
and
prescriptive
practices
which
in which it could create new opportunities.
for developers. So
That's I don't mean to cut you off, but yeah, I got exposed to that where if you take those big John Deere Caterpillar machinery that's being used, to excavate and stuff like that, those things are transmitting data back and forth in real time, in just support of maintenance of that machine. There's those guardrails of, if my response data back is within here, that machine's okay.
Yeah.
You already have scheduled maintenance. And I had learned that all that maintenance happens on site after hours, because the financial impact, if that thing goes down during the day, is huge in just the daisy chain of how it can impact.
Yeah.
And yeah, so.
Yeah, very much, very relevant example. Similar example I had was from Alberta. In Alberta, we dig oil from soil. It's not underground. So we extract oil from soil. So these giant diggers, if exactly what you're saying, if they stop working, it's like hundreds of thousands everyday loss.
Right.
So machine health prediction prescription was a project we did like 15 years ago. So capturing their sensor data from their motors, how much electricity they're consuming, not electricity, but power they're consuming, how their friction and brake mechanisms are working. These would be data to monitor their health.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is, but that data could also be useful elsewhere. I remember another example in which we were monitoring the pine beetle problem by flying planes and capturing the color of the leaves, exactly. So we would capture the pictures, sometimes pictures, not just still, but moving pictures. But then this biologist for which I was doing this job, they would compute the carbon index, exactly what you're describing.
So we have a thing from the listeners. With this simplification and cost savings in customer service, tracking of projects and where they buy, the ever-present risk of purchasing preference data and marketing targeted or assisted with personal data, and all the information collected about these processes. So, would users become predictable? In other words, with all this data coming in, then the users are becoming completely predictable.
I'm not sure if we can say predictable, but of course we are learning better or more about those users. Can you predict all their actions or choices in the future? It's too difficult. But at least
you can't
with all this data, you are able to understand them much better than what you did let's say,
Yeah.
10 years
Sure.
ago.
You would have that much more historical data.
I think we answered that question.
Okay, so, but now recall this picture. So what I'm trying to do is, I was telling you, these are the main objectives of the API enterprise. Monetization, automation, simplification, or democratization, knowledge sharing, or just doing good with the data that you own and creating more innovations, or let others create innovation. So bringing more democracy, it's a big word, but democratizing,
Around your data. So
those are the four objectives. Can you think of anything else? What API's objective could be? In my opinion, everything falls in these four categories.
Yeah. Anything else I was trying to think of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to, if something comes to your mind, and also to the online audience. You talked about the knowledge sharing that falls here. You talked about simplification. You talked about some other aspects. So more or less they're captured here, but I would love to see what else could be the motivation for some of the people building APIs.
Well, even if you take something like medical devices, or even what we're talking about with those large John Deere, Caterpillar type of stuff, it falls into more than one of these. It will fall into monetization, because that's how you can let folks know what they need to buy or whatever.
Yeah.
But then it can also fall into automation in that capacity.
That's true. I'm not saying that you may not have multiple objectives.
Right.
You may have all of them, or you have one of them.
Yeah.
Okay, but now recall, this is the picture we are dealing with. You have all those objectives, but it needs to fit in this picture. You have different stakeholders, you have these all complexities, you have licensing models, you have different aspects of governance that you need to care about, you have security. So how do you do this? So for that, what do we need?
A lawyer.
The plan.
Okay, close enough. You can put it together. When we have a lawyer,
Or a policy.
when we have a plan, we have a policy, that's called governance, isn't it?
Oh, yes. That's right.
Fair enough.
So those are the key attributes we need to bring visibility into your ecosystem. So what are the objectives for having a governance in the API ecosystem? You have visibility, you want to bring cost under control, or visibility to the cost itself. Visibility means pretty much everything. Then another part that governance you want to bring in is for the purpose of compliance. It's not that you want to spend money. It's not that you like transparency, but it's just that you have to do it because law requires you to do it, because you have to demonstrate that you're compliant with these things. For example, an auditor comes, okay, show us all your medical data is within the US, right? So you have to meet those requirements. So that's why you need compliance. Last but not the least, you also have governance objective to build trust in your ecosystem. Okay? So you through your APIs, even though you are not visible, but when your partner ecosystem depends on your APIs, again, I just keep remembering Chad with this example. Look, he remembers his partner, that was free, but then they shut it off because they didn't like the fact that they were making money off that. So that's a good situation. It's not necessarily a bad situation, but to achieve all that, at the end of the day, your goal is you want to build trust in your APIs because people's lives may depend on those.
Yes.
If it's a Tesla vehicle, which is depending on, let's say, a satellite connected through some API calls, or through, let's say, image processing sensor provided by a third party, it's a life and death matter in many cases, right? Similarly, You can think about banking, you can think about insurance, many places. Trust is very, very important that you need to put in place through your APIs. So moving along, while you achieve that, you have the automation and monetization in place. These are some of the considerations you have to keep in mind. On the ground, you need to centralize the orchestration. For example, you may have 100 different products. Those products may be operating in different countries, supporting native customers and partners. But then you need a centralized orchestration of the governance efforts. Discovery that you mentioned is also very much part of that. You need to manage the operational legal risks. You need to also take care of the existing investments, because all those tools and systems you have put in place, you don't want to rip them apart. So you want to harmonize which APIs are basically creating value, which APIs are not. Maybe they are internal, they are external. And then last but not the least, you need to manage the life cycle of those APIs as products. Okay, again, recall, these could be your APIs in the categories of internal, external, and unknown APIs. I'm going to skip some of these parts. We'll take a short break. We have 1 hour left. I just want to wrap up in half an hour the slides, and then half an hour some quick demonstrations to do the quick study I promised. Let me grab a quick water.
Yes. Yeah, I gotta go Badger tonight.
All right. So now let's focus on the consumer. When you are consuming APIs, and part of the reason you are paying attention to APIs is not only because they are costing you money, but also they are posing certain risks to your organization as well, from a legal point of view, from a security point of view. So we'll see some
of those examples.
So the very first point from a consumer point of view that you face is that you want to solve the invisibility problem. Why invisibility problem? You may have hundreds and thousands of APIs. You may not know exactly which products, which teams are consuming those APIs. It is possible that one team is using multiple APIs, but it is also possible one API is being used in multiple products. So think about this situation. Let's say you have an enterprise in which you have 10 different departments, and all of them, they want to use ChatGPT for various purposes. Do you have one single account in which that API is integrated to all the teams and products, or each of those teams, they have their own ChatGPT account? There's no right or wrong answer here, right?
Oh, sure.
But again, yeah, Dave, go ahead. If you have any thoughts, how do you manage that situation?
Well, I think you just gotta begin with the awareness and understanding of what you're looking to accomplish, what is the objective, what does the company need, And then through that, you can better understand what is a better way to manage it, understand it, and govern it from
Right.
there.
And this is also from a cost point of view important problem because many of these APIs could be very premium products.
Sure.
And every time you call, you need to monitor it. It's like buying phone, very expensive phone, but not just expensive phone, but the plan itself, and giving it to your kids. And they are just using it and abusing it, and you don't have a way to track the usage. Right? So APIs, as I mentioned, it could be very much like every API call costs you money. And if you have hundreds of different team members that are using that for various product development services perspective, how do you track that? How do you manage that? So governance.
Yeah, and even like Tim was saying earlier, could be an organization that's large enough where I'm in one department that needs certain data, Tim's in another department that needs separate data, and maybe there's a benefit in keeping those two isolated in some capacity.
Yeah.
Physically too.
Yes.
I think it's just a real pain point with the API providers because you don't have visibility into their secure development, for example, except for like maybe due diligence or vendor questionnaires or something like that, or maybe their SOC, you can get their SOC report or PCI. That's probably all you're going to see when you're consuming their API. So ensuring that their standards might align to your standards is something that is always kind of difficult to figure out.
Yeah, true. And this is true for any product that you consume. Each vendor is going to be unique, so APIs are no different. But this is from a consumer's point of view, you will experience these same points. The first is mainly focused on perhaps third-party APIs you're consuming. The second would also be about, or the third would also be about your own APIs as well. If you are exposing your APIs, like how you're scaling the security of those APIs when you're managing not just one but hundreds of APIs. So in visibility, you want to know which APIs, usability, where they are being used, and the scalability is about, are you able to manage them on a larger scale, thousands of those assets at go. So what are the security risks? If they are unknown APIs, you are talking about free public APIs that came to open source usage. You have, some of those APIs may have authentication problems, and you are exposed to issues that were not in your control. Even if you know these APIs could very much change their policies. They could change their responses because at the end of the day, APIs are providing you data. What if some of the tags change upon which you were depending upon? What if they deprecated the API to provide one particular piece of information that was essentially important to you? So how do you manage all those? Even just the unknown APIs are not only a problem, but also the APIs that you know, but they are not under your control, that depend on third parties also causes security risk. Financial risk, again, if you don't even know APIs and somehow they are being called within your application, that somehow developer wrote it or an open source library that you added was automatically making those calls, perhaps you're breaching the terms of services by that vendor who provided the API. And even if they were known, you may have technical implementation resulting in regulatory exposure because they may be providing some data that could be PII or FII, which exposes you to certain risks. Licensing issues from unknown APIs, again, you are exposed to various risks. In particularly, the most important case I've seen is the rate limits. So many of those APIs, which are not documented properly, they are there, they exist, but they do not necessarily have an open policy that how many limits they are imposing on you to call those APIs, because they are perhaps not very big companies, but your product depends on those APIs because they have a very unique piece of information that you need, and they pose certain legal risk to you because the terms of services may change or other technical implementations may expose a piece of information that does not necessarily create problem for them, but creates problem for you. This is the last piece, operational risk. And this is a use case I can perhaps give an example where we bought a company and everything went well. We did the due diligence as a technical team. And after 6 months of the acquisition, we realized that this particular product was choking. And after struggling for a few months, we realized that there was this API that had a rate limit. So there was no security risk. There was no immediate licensing risk, but it just was an operational nightmare.
Right.
Because this API couldn't scale to the level that this application needed to support.
Right.
They needed to change their entire infrastructure.
Hosted somewhere.
Where they had more powerful machines so that they can support more query. It was more scalable.
Oh, so it's more of a technical limitation than versus a licensing.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct. So it was their technical problem, but that became our operational risk.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because the way their API was implemented, it couldn't scale to our operation.
To your needs. Right.
All right. So I can summarize all this into 5 main categories of risks. Security, as you understand clearly, it is if your API is compromised, that has a direct impact on your assets. Your data breach, your asset is compromised. Legal, again, you understood the fact that you have a data breach. Maybe it's a customer data and they're not happy about it. Your data may contain some financial information and you are being sued for not protecting data, so you have some unwanted situations. Financial impact is also a type of risk in which things are not apparently clear to you immediately. For example, if you have a API that is transacting dollar value. On the other hand, you have an API that is simply giving you social media feed. Now, if the API that is doing the transactions of dollar value, if it goes down, that has immediate impact on your financial, right? Let's say this is a e-commerce API, or this is a credit card transaction API, which is on your portal. If it goes down even for 1 day, you have a direct impact on your bottom line. But what about the other APIs that are not doing the dollar transactions? For example, social media feed. They could also have a huge financial impact. For example, take the example of a marketing company. So marketing company is consuming these feeds, but does a profiling of your product or assessment of the products, which is their key value proposition. If they are not able to get the YouTube feeds, if they're not able to get the LinkedIn feeds, then what's the value? So it ultimately has impact on the financial aspect.
Yeah.
Let's say each tweet has a dollar value. So,
well, I was just going to say that I forget the name of the organizations, but there were several that really were Reddit derivatives. So everything they were getting was from Reddit. And then when Reddit decided they wanted to go public, they cut off that access. So their value was higher because you had to go to them for the source, and it literally killed every one of those other smaller companies because that was the only data that they were delivering. Yeah.
Very familiar situation with some of the companies Google and Facebook shut down.
Gotcha.
Simply
Okay.
turned off their API usage on those companies.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Okay, operational risk, as I mentioned, it's more business continuity and regulatory compliance. As I mentioned, a long-term impact is you are having a situation in which you're launching a product in a specific geography, customized to a specific set of customers. Now suddenly you realize that you're not meeting the data sovereignty issues. And then now that delays your launch and basically creates regulatory issues for you. Okay, so the case study that I was promising. In this case study, what I want to show it to you is that this legal framework we talked about from second session onwards is such an important topic that needs your attention today. First, I will present from a consumer point of view, and then I will also ask you to think about a producer point of view, which means if you were using Facebook, and this is what Facebook was doing, think about the impact. And also, if you were building APIs, what kind of policies that you want to put forward so that you're not hindering innovation, you're supporting the customer base and the openness with which they are building applications on top of your APIs, but also, making sure that you can support that ecosystem without compromising too much on your monetization strategy. So the use case I'm going to talk about is, it is very intuitive for us to understand. You can tell, or you can at least guess, if you cannot tell for sure, you can guess from enterprises, privacy statements, and terms of services, how they are promoting their APIs or the usage of their data. Okay? And if, let's say, certain enterprises are being too restrictive or certain enterprises being too flexible, it will reflect in their terms of services. It's not very surprising. On one hand, you can have a very liberal statement about how you use their APIs. On the other hand, you can have a very restrictive policy that will tell you these guys do not want to do these things. So what I'm saying is, my thesis is that you can tell a lot about the vendors, your reliance on third-party vendors by reading their terms of services and privacy systems. So this is the case I'm sharing with you. What you're seeing is, this is a platform policy of Facebook from 2017. Okay? And if my thesis is correct, if my hypothesis is valid, then we would see the change in their policies over a period of time. And that is where I want to bring your attention to. Look, in 2017, one of their policy is, do not duplicate or do not replicate core functionality that Facebook already provides. So this is in the context of Facebook providing their APIs to the developers to use whatever they want to use it. Of course, they have a very strict due diligence process in place now, but in 2017 they were not so much restrictive. Do you know what happened with Facebook during that time, after 2022?
no.
It wasn't the thing where they were selling names to the political research company. I can't remember the name.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh,
Something to do with your president.
God, what was that?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was Cambridge Analytica
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
issue. So Cambridge Analytica was harvesting Facebook data, and then the allegation was they were influencing through the Facebook by using these profiles the voters' mind.
Right. Yeah.
By using the personal information, looking at their choices, choices, and all that. I don't know what was the science behind it, but that was the acquisition. So in this case, you can, it's nothing to do with that case, but just a good reference point, keep in mind. Look what they're saying, and that makes perfect sense to me, at least. You know, they're saying, use my APIs, use my data, but don't build what I already have. Why would they allow you to do that? That makes sense, right? It's fair. Let's go next. Another statement. They are saying, don't build an app whose primary objective or purpose is to redirect people off Facebook. So two things that caught my attention. One is they're saying, don't replicate my features. Also, don't build features that will take my customers away from me.
Yeah, don't use our data to become a competitor.
Yeah.
A direct
Even
competitor.
even if you're not building the same exact feature, but don't build that will make people leave Facebook. Okay? That's very broad, right? In many ways.
Well, one of the problems with that, it being extremely broad, is that they could decide to do what you do in the future, and now you're a competitor of theirs because of decisions they made.
Very good point.
And it's just an update to the terms and conditions.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, the terms and conditions don't change because they already state that you're not allowed to compete with them, and now they compete with you.
Think about it.
Oh, gotcha.
This is what is now. This is what is today. They removed both those conditions. Why would they do that?
Can we ask the lawyer?
Yes, I was thinking. He would comment, but he was too busy doing his due diligence on other documents, right? The question is, in 2017 or earlier versions of so they don't replicate my features, and also don't build something that will take my customers away from me. Yep. But they dropped both conditions now onwards. This is 2023. Yeah. 23 onwards, they removed those two conditions. Why would they do that?
Probably their losses in the EU and antitrust laws. That's what I would think. They lost some significant actions, paid a lot of fines for their anti-competitive behavior. I assume that's what drove that. Okay.
Like monopolistic behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was hurting their own business because they couldn't require them. They weren't allowing. Yeah, they weren't allowing people. I mean, that's such a broad thing, like almost like don't agree to say don't build something that could take people away. So maybe they're hurting their own company by not having those features being developed and being able to acquire or being able to compete or whatever it is. There wasn't enough features maybe, or there were less features.
What do you think?
I would have said the same thing. Just somewhere else. Just remove it here to put it somewhere else in the contracts.
No, we did thorough analysis of many other documents. We couldn't find similar condition.
It's probably hurting them.
And that's why they.
Somehow it impacted the bottom line.
Yeah, not probably.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't beneficial.
It was beneficial.
Yeah.
That's why. But
Two reasons. I think the first one, you're gonna like.
I was gonna say,
Two things came to my mind. First thing was, it is too difficult for them to enforce. How can they find out from all the innovations that they will build on Facebook? It is too difficult for them to track. It's very expensive if they want to enforce. The other reason is, perhaps they want people to build, as he suggested, and then see what they're doing, and then either shut them down or buy them out.
It's that one.
It's that one?
It's gotta be. Yeah, because why would you take it, if you have it, you don't necessarily need to enforce it.
Well, so I think it's a good way to accomplish. Because there are other ways
to accomplish
what we're talking about here, but from certainly an EU perspective, those provisions are probably illegal, and I think
I mean, that they were not defendable?
that they get tired of paying fines. for that, they keep it.
Okay.
I have a question for you, Marty. If they don't enforce it, doesn't that cause problems? Because then they selectively enforce it, then that puts them.
So the law does, most, certainly intellectual property laws don't require that you take legal action against people. Patents, copyrights, trade secrets.
We're supposed to take reasonable efforts, but it doesn't include suing people.
In this regard, it might be that it could
Force it.
but the consequences to them of having a rule and not enforcing it would seem to me only deleterious to them if the existence of the prohibition causes them risk.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, and we would never know what exactly is the reason behind it, but it could be combination of all of that.
Do other platforms still have such a prohibition?
That's what we're gonna do as an exercise. So I will let you show how to conduct this analysis.
That you can.
Have more curiosity in identifying which vendor you want to investigate. But that's what we're gonna do as a home exercise. But to summarize this case, this tells us two things. That by monitoring and looking into these documents, we can learn about their legal framework, what these companies are doing.
Sure.
We can learn from them and see what policies do we want to adopt for ourselves. So here, we have seen cases in which Facebook actually shut down many startups by citing these violations. So by removing this, now they have a weapon. It's a double-edged sword. They can swing either way. So this could swing in their favor in the sense they can say, look, you're violating our terms of services by citing other conditions, but also they are letting the competition grow and perhaps wait for the opportunity to either see what other innovations are being created and perhaps replicate from them or buy them out or shut them down. So they can strategize it in a better way by having such a
Let someone else do their R&D.
Yeah. Because see, the beauty about APIs is you can always monitor your APIs, who's using them.
Right.
With open source, when you put it on GitHub, nobody is telling you which software has already been embedded. They have shipped the software, where it went, unless until somebody grabs a piece of your software and does the due diligence on it, that they are using your software. But APIs are not like that. The moment you make a call to the API, they have recorded you.
Yeah.
Because the way they are controlling is keys or IP address they have tracked for you, whatever.
Yeah. Like you said, there's an
right.
auditability.
Exactly. So this way, I think we learn two things. APIs are very powerful for monetization and providing capabilities to others, but also they also work as a double-edged sword, where you can innovate, allow others to innovate, but also use as a strategy. So let's take a
online. Balaji says, in Silicon Valley, there's a saying: if you can't beat them, buy them and kill them if necessary.
Yeah, I've seen that too often. That's a good comment. Thank you. So are you guys ready to do some hands-on?
Yeah.
Okay. So log into your API Discovery account. If you don't have, ask Tim or me. I will send you an invite. You can get access.
I'm going to follow
exercise
you
is very
because
straightforward.
this is the work laptop.
You can play. I'll go for it.
I'll stop sharing because I'm going to log into another system. Okay. to stop sharing and switch to my screen.
You're gonna keep an eye on that thing.
Hmm?
You'll keep an eye on the email then, just in case.
Mhm. I do. I do regularly.
No, I know, yeah, but I mean, just now, that's what I'm saying.
Well, and then if,
Somebody
when it
responds
comes,
to that.
I'll forward it to you, and we'll get it into our sophisticated manual tracking system.
Hmm. Oh, shoot.
What's the URL?
Huh?
What's the URL?
Years.
So if you signed up on the TeejLab platform, you may not get assigned to ISACA account. So if you want to be part of the ISACA account, then
Sorry, we've got it set up where we can give you access as part of that. That's what I was dropping in the chat, where we can give you access into the platform at no cost and everything as part of the workshop series. So if anybody here doesn't have that and wants it, let us know when we can set it up. What's that?
I don't have it yet.
Okay, can you just shoot us an email real quick? We'll have to set it up after.
Okay.
But to ISACA San Diego.
Thank you, Isaac.
Okay, thank
for your
you.
wonderful questions.
Thank you so much.
I mean, I can get in the if I just have an email.
Do you want me to just send it to you now then? Tim?
Well, just tell me your email.
Okay. Tim?
It's,
Yeah, of course.
MONSOWITZ and my ISACA account's under hotmail.com. You can just leave it with my ISACA account.
Yeah.
And then that'll send me.
That'll say
It's
the
not-
link coming in, it'll say
There is a
Anthony is the
Okay.
thing. Might go to your junk.
Okay, all right.
If you want, so if I do this,
Yeah, to
and
it,
then it'll say,
Probably
give me a
could
second.
be using some Microsoft.
Gotcha.
There you are. So it says
Yeah.
it's sent it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
As a Marty.
Great question.
Hey, thanks, Marty, as always. There's somebody asking in chat.
Okay. So hopefully you guys can hear me again. I'm back.
With my screen share.
So what I'm going to show is do the same thing, what I did on my slide. I'm going to look into Facebook's platform policy.
I'm sorry, just real quick. Are you, the welcome email comes from Anthony at TeejLab.com?
Correct.
Okay, we're Tim setting somebody else up real
But that
quick.
guy, it says he already exists.
So maybe he didn't.
Okay, can you re-invite?
I can, I can send him a reminder if I can find, yeah. Right, yeah, I'll send an update. Mhm.
Are you able to invite?
Yeah, I sent him a reminder just telling him that.
We are not seeing your screen if we should, Baljeet.
Yeah, I'm just going to.
I stopped sharing again.
Should be. Let's see. Okay,
You didn't get the invite? Could it be in our friend, the junk folder?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We've seen that happen before. And it should be coming from Anthony at TeejLab.com, if that helps at all.
Yeah, it says it invited you. The time code on this is a little screwy, but it said 2:30 p.m., but I couldn't tell you what zone it's in, to be honest.
Then that would have just been 1 hour off.
Yeah. Remember, we used to see it was like really quite different.
I'm presuming both dates are on the 9th.
Huh?
I'm presuming both dates are on the 9th
Yeah,
at PM.
that's
Tell me if I'm making too much of a leap of faith there.
Yeah, I can't send you one manually. It has to, I have to ask the system to send it. It comes with Anthony as the system.
The other day, since you put in under, if I just go to the URL, do like forgot my password.
That should work
Yeah.
because it should have your email attached to the ISACA account.
No problem.
I can
Yeah, he's saying he didn't get the
Just
invite.
didn't receive the email.
We have the same problem.
I don't know why it's not. Why the system?
What's his email ID?
This one, DMON SOV
Give me 1 second.
SOWITZ.
Sorry, say that again.
DMON SOWITZ
SOW.
ITZ.
at Hotmail. Yeah, but that should be enough to find. What the hell?
I didn't find it.
That's so weird because invitation.
Is this correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And it's at hotmail.com if it needs to be the complete.
No, it should not be.
Yeah, it should be wild card. That's wild.
Okay, let me send the invite again.
Give me a break.
One break
This
coming up.
This is
correct.
Remember that? Were you able to get in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, enough.
Here.
Yeah, it says
Yeah.
the invitation has been sent. So looks like you, another place
Place for me to check as if the email has been sent.
something. Yeah, the email has gone.
Invitation. Okay.
Oh, it bounced back. Your email bounced back. Check again if this is.
Now it is, it's here.
The email bounced back.
Oh, it's saying that the sending address was not recognized
Suspected
as a valid
spam.
sender.
So put Anthony or something in there. Rules. Anthony rules.
Do you have another email that we can try?
Yeah, you can try the same Gmail,
Same.
same email.
You want to do it or me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick time check, we're at about 20 minutes.
Okay. I think we'll wrap up. So
There may be something going on because Balaji's, who is saying that he
Same
didn't
thing, yeah.
receive it either. So Tim and I, you go ahead and proceed.
Okay.
And
We'll
Tim and
figure
I
this out
can work
later.
on those.
Yeah.
Well, Tim just resent it to you, to the Gmail.
You know, I tried to send Gmail to that Tom guy, the speaker next week,
Yeah,
and it bounced the first time.
yeah, that got kicked back by Microsoft. Or like
Yeah.
Google said, Microsoft bad.
We can also do it together. So we can do.
Yeah, here I can give my, there, like a.
Okay, so the-
Email them in that I have.
What I want to show you now is, oh, I'm not showing this video, guys. So what I want to show you now is what I showed you on my slides. So I have Facebook's platform policy from 2017 and today's current platform policy.
Well, he doesn't.
So if you go, I will show you how to do that later, but right now I'm just trying to show you.
Sure.
To our email gateways.
So this is their 2017 policy. And the keyword I was interested in was this guy.
And the screen shared, there you go.
Don't replicate. Yeah, so you can see that this is their 2017 copy in which they are saying don't replicate core functionality that Facebook already provides. And if I access their latest one, so this is their 2013, sorry, 2017. Double check. So this is their 2017, yes. So the latest one, which is now directly fetching from their website now. So this is from their
Directly from the website.
Let's see if you can find it here. It's missing here. So the same statement is missing here. Now let's see if I want to do this for OpenAI. Which one should we do it? OpenAI, Google? What should we? Anybody has any interest?
OpenAI?
OpenAI,
Okay, let's
sure.
do OpenAI.
So let me see how you got there.
So to do that, what I'm going to do is just add it here. So you guys are in the same account that I am in. You see the logo here. So I'm going to take one or two steps. And I'm going to add a new vendor that I want to OpenAI. And let's see if you can grab their statement, OpenAI. Company. Where there is API log. Pricing. Do they also have platform policy or
What was it?
It's account-based. This is why you want to have Reddit. Oh, look at the back.
terms of use? So let's say we use terms of use. Which account I'm adding? Yeah. This is the terms of service. Just writing some description so that I know what I'm
looking into.
and I
We
can
can
add the
add the
license.
license agreement here.
So this is what the terms of use is. We call this terms of use. Let's add the logo as well. Okay, I'm just adding a logo so that I can recognize.
Sure.
If I have multiple vendors, I can recognize them easily. So I save this. So just to let you know, this is what I created. I have these different other vendors I'm just playing with. So this is what I just created. And as you can see that here, if I go click there, I should be able to see the agreement that I have written. I didn't have the API. So we are just call sub API. Chat GPT. Okay, so we are in precise. Okay, so you can see that the agreement has been added. I just added this for OpenAI. And I don't necessarily have their API right now integrated, but I'm just showing the use case for this. So if I click there, it takes me to the terms of use. Okay, now let me apply our AI to analyze this agreement, see what does it find. So here, I have this analyze button. Okay, so it is saying agreement home page cannot be accessed. Maybe it's they're blocking it. So I have a way to do this.
Bastards.
I will just add another copy of this and take their copy from 2024.
Archive.
Okay. What happens to the agreement? Terms of use. Okay, so you can see that I have two documents now. One from today's, this is latest, which fetches from this guy. But then I also have an archived copy from April 1st, 2015. So very recent copy. So let's see if I can access this guy. Okay, I'm able to access that. And let's see if I can analyze it. Okay, so this is what the system has analyzed to tell me. Okay, let me go to the prohibition section. So this one tells me what are the permissions they are allowing you. This one is telling me what are the obligations when you use those uh, assets, and this one is telling me what they are saying, don't do it with my APIs. So you may not use our services for any illegal, harmful, abusive activity. So that's very common sense. And you may not assign or transfer any rights or obligations under these terms. Attempt to that will be void. Given the probabilistic nature of machine learning, use of our services may, in some situations, result in output that does not accurately reflect real basis of facts. So as you were saying, pointing out, they don't take that responsibility.
Yeah.
So they basically say, no problem, you use my results.
And then there's the one right there from
Which
what
one?
we were
This one?
talking about earlier.
Which one?
The one you have highlighted about you may not share account credentials.
Okay, credentials to make your account available to anyone and are responsible for all activities that is associated with your account. All services may not be used for any end use prohibited by applicable trade laws, and your input may not include material or information that requires a government license. That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
So you cannot use their art with any government specific documents or art that actually requires you to seek license from the government. So, okay, that's interesting one. But they're just saying for government, not necessarily any other parties.
Right. Yeah, not from another private party.
By the way, this is still very latest. This is still from 2025. Let's see, when did they launch?
Oh, about, what,
124?
Okay, so this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna add one from 2022. Okay, let's see what were they saying previously.
Sure.
Okay, so let's try that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say add another archive. So to add an archive, you need to choose a date, how far you want to go back, and just say add archive. So let's choose the date first. I don't want to choose archive on archive, I want to choose from the original archive. So I will choose this guy. Tim, you said they launched in 2022?
I think it was early 24, but I'm not sure.
Or 24? Oh, okay.
Well,
I don't know if it.
About launch, it just when it hit the news, but it could have been launched before.
Well,
Just to be
2022
safe,
would have
let's
been.
take 2023
Yeah, go
mid.
for it. 22,
Sure.
go
Yeah.
for it.
That was after COVID.
Okay, let's take June, 1st June in 2022, and add a archive. Okay, so we added the archive for June 2023. So now I should be able to see 3 documents rather than 1 document. One is current, one is back in May 1st, and the other one in 2023, June 1st. Okay, so let's analyze this now. Okay, we will see under the same section again because I want to compare apples to apples. Okay, so
Look at that. Wow, yeah. Look at the listing of
Yes.
government entities.
Yeah, the definitely it has changed.
Right.
So they were more restrictive in the past than they are what right now.
Yeah, they just made an umbrella for the U.S. government.
Yeah, so let's see if you find something here.
You may not use OpenAI's or any, it's that's good. Assignment and delegation, you may not assign or delegate any rights or obligation under this term, including connection with a change of control. The service may not be used for the benefit of exported, re-exported into the US embargo countries, collectively the embargoed countries. So are they telling us that now it is allowed for embargo countries?
No, I don't think, no, they're not. But what they are saying though, is they're making more blanket statements so that they can come back and say, you know, you guys did something wrong. Whereas I could say, oh, I didn't use an embargo country, I used somebody else on this list. Now you can't use anybody on any,
Yeah.
you know, bad list.
Yeah, I interpret it as you just can't do government stuff at all
Yeah, period.
anymore, whereas it was more specific
Yeah.
previously.
Yeah, yeah,
They
exactly. So
broadened
they
the
have broadened
restriction.
it now.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
broadened the restriction.
Yeah, so this, they replace this
They replace this guy with this
guy.
It looks like. But
Oh,
we
yeah.
can do another analysis. There is another analysis we can do here is.
Not the guy.
This one. What?
They're gonna charge you. Well, I know the card.
Well, okay, what? Let me see if I can use this one.
I mean,
We are at time just about, by the way.
Okay, so, yeah, so I think we will follow up with the rest of the content, perhaps, in a follow-up workshop. But let me just wrap up quickly, if you allow me just 1 minute.
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
So.
Thanks.
So in summary, we have so in summary, these terms of services or frameworks that enterprises are building are fun to watch and see how they evolve, and also learn from them for our own framework that we're building and see how we enable different community to use our APIs. So in summary, we did this exercise already.
Share your screen, yeah. Oh, there you go. It's
there, right? So in summary, we looked at the basis that forms the legal framework around API usages. We looked at what constitute that framework, like terms of use, privacy statements, documents. We
did some
on Facebook and OpenAI documents. We also looked at the type of APIs we deal with, who the owners are, what are the IP issues. We also looked at, from a producer's point of view, what are the different models and monetization strategies we can apply and look into mitigating some of the risks that we see from a producer's point of view. At the end, we also looked into the consumer's point of view when we are looking at consuming third-party APIs. In particular, we looked at, from a licensing point of view, the third-party APIs. Yes. Okay, so thank you very much. That concludes. This is my contact detail. Thank you for having me once again. You have been very gracious to sit throughout the workshop. Very thankful for joining and inviting me to your chapter. But also people to online. Thank you so much for being with us online. Really honored and humbled to be part of this community. So very happy to come for the 4th workshop online. So looking forward to seeing everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Probably wouldn't have to tell people. There's to correct that we have some user documentation online.
Yes. So I think he needs to lock
the room, if I'm not wrong.
but I will send an email that you guys can forward.
Okay.
We have a user community page.
Yeah.
Remember, we had a document, the do's and don'ts. We can re-forward that again.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
All right, thank you, everyone. Online, I'm going to, should I close the session?
I think so. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Once again, thanks for great
Actually,
feedback and questions.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend.